call the Board of Selectmen's meeting for Monday, April 11th, back into session. At 5:30, actually at 4:45, we had the opportunity to tour the South Harwich Meeting House to get an update firsthand as to what's going on down there. And you'll see there's an article that we're going to talk about tonight. Hopefully take some action on associated with that. We came back here, and at 5:30 we went into executive session. We dealt with a water employees union issue, and we also discussed the cemetery at First Congregational Church. And we're back in open session. So please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I just want to make one brief announcement, and that is, you'll notice Linda Sabula is not with us this evening. Unfortunately, I have to tell you or inform you that her husband Bob was taken to Cape Cod Hospital about 4 o'clock today. He's had a couple of episodes recently, and we wish him the best, and he will be in our thoughts and prayers. So she did call me. She was racing to the hospital because this happened when he was at work. I don't have an update from there, but obviously it's a concern for all of us, so we will carry on. So keep him in your prayers, please. Weekly briefing. Anybody for weekly briefing? Public comments and announcements? Oh, yeah. Brooke, oh, go ahead.
Thank you.
And someone rise faster than you. It's amazing.
Got here slower, though. Voter Information Committee. I'm Chris Joyce, chair of that committee, and I want to make a couple of announcements. We're hosting 3 different programs, all here in the Griffin Room. They'll be televised. The first one is tomorrow, 10 a.m. Joanne Riss will moderate a panel discussion on the financial state of Harwich. Participants include Chris Clark, Andrew Gould, Peter Hughes.
Yeah,
Say
that's
yes.
right. Yeah, say yes.
Scott Carpenter, Monomoy Regional School District Superintendent, Dana DaCosta, FinCom Chair, Brian Whittegren, Robert Sanborn, Superintendent of Cape Cod Regional Technical High School. The next program we're hosting, it'll also be televised on Channel 18. Peg Rose, also a committee member, she's going to have the department heads and committee chairs discuss their warrant articles. So it's a review of the town warrant. The other program we're hosting is on the 28th at 1 o'clock, again in the Griffin Room. The League of Women Voters will moderate a forum debate with those candidates, the 4 of them running for the selectman seat. So we look forward to you coming to all 3 of those programs, or at least one. Yep.
Shirley.
What's the date of the second one? We didn't get
The
that.
19th.
19th. At
Yep.
what time?
9 a.m. So
all
we're
in this room, right?
all in this room.
Okay,
All yep.
Makes it easy.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Brooke?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'm making an announcement tonight for the Harwich Civic Association. We'll be having a candidates forum on Saturday, April 30th at 10 a.m. here in the Griffin Room. So we're inviting all the selectmen candidates and then also candidates running for other offices as well at that time. So that'd be great. The other quick question or point I wanted to make as an individual is in regard to the Stratford proposal for the middle school reuse, and hoping we could get a copy of that for the voters to see, that, you know, perhaps a copy that could be made available at the library. I checked. There still is not one there. I think the town planner requested one for Stratford. The reason I'm raising this is that obviously the voters will be looking at all these different options, and this is one that's referred to specifically. This is the one that they were offering $600,000, but I think it's important for the voters to understand what it is that was proposed at that time, so they get an idea of, you know, the nature of this approach.
Okay.
Thank
Chris,
you.
you check in on that?
Yeah, I'll check into that.
Thank you.
Sorry.
And if you have it and it's over in the library, let Brooke know, please.
Yep.
Close the loop. Okay? Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Janelle?
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept to approve minutes, March 21st, 2016, regular session. I'm sorry. Yes. Approve expenditure of $4,716.63 from the cable fund for studio equipment at Monomoy Regional High School. Approve expenditure of $25,905 from the cable fund for upgrading equipment and providing for live broadcast. Approve the 2016 summer concert series to be held at Brooks Park, and approve the application for $1 million Mass Seaport Economic Council grant for Saquotucket Harbor, and authorize town administrator to be signatory on all grant documents.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Chris, can I just ask on item B, which is spending cable funds for Monomoy Regional High School, I've been asked, is that an appropriate use of the cable fund?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
It's not-
Any of the capital cable funds are used for public education and government purposes, so obviously Monomoy Regional School qualifies as the educational purpose under that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? It's a vote. Thank you. Okay. Next, we move on to public hearings and presentations. Text title. Amy, how are you?
I'm well, how are you?
You have Bill Cowan with you, I think.
Yes. I don't know how we're gonna share this.
This is, do you have a stool? Do you have a ladder?
So we've been looking into selling the tax titles, and I have a brief PowerPoint presentation just to go over the basics of it for you. So we can begin. That's just the general laws that allow for the town to do that, to sell the tax titles. We're not selling the properties, just the liens on the properties. And, yeah. So currently, we have 326 properties in tax title, with almost 5.6 million due. Only 91 of those properties, 28%, have homes or buildings on them. And out of those, only 39 appear to be owner-occupied, judging just by where the tax bills are mailed. So it looks like 57% are second homes or rentals.
Could you back up to that slide, please? Can we go back to the slide? Yeah. Would you just tell us what triggers something to be, a property to be in tax title? What does that mean?
Unpaid taxes, right now, I am just starting to work on the fiscal year 2015s. Right now, there are 79 of those that are still unpaid. So it's pretty much right around a year and a half, 2 years, that if the taxes remain unpaid, then we put a lien at the Registry of Deeds on the property.
So if you're in arrears for 2 years,
Yep.
24 months,
Yep.
basically on your taxes, that triggers some acts on your part.
We can do it sooner than that, it's just a matter of,
I'm just trying to,
yeah.
I'm just trying so people can understand the
Right,
process.
right,
Because if there's someone sitting out there who's behind,
right.
it's not
Yep.
nice to be known.
And once they are in tax title, once there is a lien placed on them, it's 16% interest.
Right.
So it's pretty steep.
So it can accumulate very quickly when you get behind on your
Exactly,
taxes.
exactly.
Okay, go ahead.
So Bill is from Talladge, who is a tax lien investment company. And this is just some information from them. In their experience, 30 to 40%, once they are published that we're gonna be going to tax sale, they get paid off. So, and
When you
then
say tax sale, you mean
we're, yeah.
selling the property?
Right, we're gonna go to auction.
Yeah,
Bill's company, along with other companies, would bid on the lots. We can either sell everything together, or we can put them together in bundles of various properties. And there's no cost to us to do that, except for preparing the ad, preparing which properties we're gonna sell. The cost of the ad can be added to the accounts, so it really is very little cost to us.
okay, so tell us historically how the town of Harwich has handled their own tax title issues in the past.
Historically, we take a few, every few years, and put them into land court for foreclosure, but that's a real slow, long process. I think since I've been here, since '97, there's maybe only been 4 or 5 that we've actually foreclosed on. It's a really long process.
And sort of what's our criteria at that point? Are they the really old ones, or?
You know, sometimes it's something we might be interested in, a property that, you know, the town might be interested in for something, or old ones. Typically, we have never foreclosed on a property that's got a home on it, especially owner occupied.
Okay, but unless we have an interest in it, and excuse me just for pumping these questions out there, but I think everybody has them.
Right,
We historically have not typically just said, okay, we want to go capture that revenue, so we're going to go sell the property because they're behind for 2 years. So we
Right.
want to go capture that revenue.
right,
You're talking about a different model now,
yep.
to do it more aggressively, I would say? you
Right,
know.
well, we'd sell them.
Yeah.
We would sell the tax liens, and then the company that would buy them would be more aggressive.
Understand. Chris,
Yeah.
did you have a?
Yeah, I just wanted to, you know, my time here with Mary McIsaac, I think what Mary did was she would take the approach of if there's big items or big, you know, dollars that were out there that we wanted to try to capture, then she would pursue kind of select parcels for those reasons. I think it was mostly driven by how much money was involved. Here you can see we've kind of built up where it's almost 300, with 267. You know, parcels, and it's getting to be overwhelming. So I think this gives us an opportunity to kind of get up to speed. And one of the things that was in the materials was that the town of Yarmouth had done and one of the things that really stuck out to me was I think they had about 300 parcels, and once they did this, they were now down to about 40, which makes it a more manageable number.
Right,
So I think that strategy initially was made some sense to pursue big dollars, and Mary, I think, inherited some of this, so I don't want to just say it was
Understand.
just Mary. But I think now when you get such a large amount, we have to try to get caught up. And I think this strategy makes a lot of sense at this stage of the,
right,
Amy,
yeah.
go
Well, yeah, we've been adding like 25 to 30 accounts every year, and maybe only a handful get paid off each year, so it's a lot. It is
Sorry to keep-
definitely growing.
Yep, sorry to keep interrupting you.
That's
Go ahead.
okay.
Go ahead.
That's all right. Next, Jamie. So let's see, this is how the assignment would work, how the auction would be started. We'd first send notice to all the owners, then we would publish it in the newspaper and 2 public places in town, and then we'd hold the auction. That's it. That's it. Any
Okay, so-
questions? Other questions?
Well, I guess we want to hear from Bill.
Okay.
You could describe what Tally actually does, and, you know, it does say they're a tax, what do you call it, tax title investment company, so you invest in,
Right, so our company, all we
titles.
do is buy tax liens from cities and towns in Massachusetts. In fact, we were the winning bidder in a number of the Yarmouth auctions that they had. And what our company does is, I view our company as a processing company. We basically purchase liens from municipalities, and we process them through the land court, just like a municipality would. One of the slides that got flipped through very quickly is that if you look at the actual tax title foreclosure rate in Massachusetts, that number is less than 0.02% of all properties. And the reason for that is that according to DOR statistics, well over 98.5% of all properties actually pay their taxes on time. So the 5.6 million problem that you have here stems from about 1.5% on average of your properties. By going through the process, our statistics show, along with land court statistics, well over 90% of that 1.5% actually redeemed at some point in time. It might be directly with the municipality, it might be prior to the land court filing, it might be at some point during the land court process, but very few actually foreclose. And then when you look at the ones that actually foreclose, most of them are land, commercial properties, multifamily properties, vacant single family that ends up in the AG's receivership program, for example. And people say, well, the headline is single family owner occupied gets foreclosed, and that's just not accurate. And the reason is because treasurers around the state have the authority to remove any tax titles that they do not want to sell. So the process can't even start until the treasurer decides what to sell, and Mary's already been through the list that shows a relatively very small percentage may even be owner-occupied. Then companies like ours, we're not in the business, in the foreclosure business, we're in the processing business. We make our money on the interest from the date of sale forward. So by law, the minimum bid for the lien is 100% of the taxes, interest, and fees that are owed to the municipality. It's going forward that companies like ours accrue the interest and ultimately get paid off through the processing process. We use the same attorneys that have represented cities and towns for doing this. Our general counsel used to be at Copeland and Page, which represents a lot of cities and towns on the tax title front. It's a great process. It's worked very well in Yarmouth. I think we've handed out, there's close to 36 communities across the state that are doing this, and it's a great tool to bring in revenues and frankly really reduce the administrative burden that falls on the treasurer's staff.
Questions from the board? Any questions? So what's the next step, Amy, do you see?
Next step really would be getting a list together of what we want to sell, anything that we don't want to sell, and sending notice to the people. I mean, I've gone through the list pretty well. Like I said, there's only 91 properties that have the buildings on them. So the rest of it's all vacant land. We have a lot of owners unknown. We have a lot of miscellaneous parcels. There's probably a lot that aren't going to be worth it, but I think if we start using this process, we're going to be adding fewer and fewer accounts every year because people are going to know what's going to happen ultimately.
Okay, Chris?
I just, in terms of timing, obviously there's over $5 million, so if we're able to recoup a fairly good portion of that, if the timing and we get the money prior to July 1st, then that actually would fall to free cash if we get it. Most likely, this would probably go into next fiscal year.
I think so, just because I wouldn't want to rush it the first time through, yeah.
So I think that, the money wouldn't be available to really FY18 when the determination of free cash is calculated. But it would have a net positive really for the town to go after this, but it is going to be a little bit of a process before that money actually becomes available to us.
Just my suggestion is we, instead of just, here we are at a meeting and we talk about it and we decide to do something, I think we need to talk about this a couple of times
Sure,
and make sure the public has some input to it.
sure.
Maybe hold a public hearing on the concept, so that, we can make sure that folks have issues, concerns, whatever, that we give them an opportunity to at least weigh in on it before we move forward. So, and as you know, town meeting's coming up in a couple of weeks, so we're gonna be kind of busy between now and then, certainly. But I think we look, sometimes toward the end of May, probably come back and let's get an update, and let's, maybe we schedule a public hearing at that point in time,
Sure,
when you're ready.
yep.
Does that work for you, Chris?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay? You guys all right with that? All right, thank you. Interesting concept, and I would say that, except for hardship cases and whatnot, but, for all those folks out there that are paying their taxes on a regular basis, those that aren't, and maybe some of them aren't doing it because they just think they can get away with it. Who
Right,
knows? I
right.
don't know.
Yeah,
But, they're sort of taking advantage of the rest of us, and the rest of us are supporting this thing called town government, and maybe they're not doing their fair share at some point, so.
exactly.
So we'll see.
Great.
Yeah, you
Thank
can
you.
come up, yeah, come on. This is gonna be good. Thank you.
Just two general questions on the same topic.
Don't run away, don't run away.
Don't run away. One is, I wondered, certainly, some of these parties, I'm sure, if they haven't paid thus far, unfortunately, most likely they will continue to not pay. And through the process of doing this, are there any techniques that might be learned of communicating with those people so that once they get a zero balance, then the treasurer can work with them so not to build up another balance? That's one question from them. And the second is, if we sell the lien, if somebody comes along to then close on that property, I was just curious how that works. Does the homeowner then pay the talmadge firm as well as the regular tax bill? I'm just curious how
Okay,
that
the
works.
mechanics of it all, okay. Either Amy or Bill, who wants to, Bill, if you want to address that, those two issues.
Sure, I'll take the second issue first
Okay,
and then
go ahead.
hand it over. In terms of the mechanics, one of the things that I didn't mention is the winning bidder is responsible for keeping the property taxes current if the property owner does not. So the property tax bills continue to go out to the property owner as if a tax lien sale never happened. But at the end of the fiscal year, the winning bidder reaches out to the collector side of the house for any of the liens that were purchased and makes good on the outstanding taxes until that lien is redeemed or foreclosed. And again, a very tiny fraction actually forecloses. In terms of mechanics, once a tax lien is sold, it's like a mortgage being assigned from a bank to another bank. If a property owner or other interested party, such as a lender, wants to pay off the old taxes, they contact whoever the winning bidder was. And this is all public record. Just like the tax taking is recorded, the assignment or sale of that tax title to the winning bidder is also recorded. So it's all available on the Registry of Deeds. And also it can be made even more simple administratively if Mary decides to sell them all as a bundle, and there typically is one company as the winning bidder. Anyone who comes into Town Hall and says, oh, I'm ready to pay my taxes, and the front desk person says, oh, you don't owe anything because it's been sold, it's very easy to say who the winning bidder was. But on a go-forward basis, any property owner has the right and legal obligation to continue to pay their property taxes. It's only if they don't that the winning bidder steps in the shoes and makes the town whole, which is another reason why it's very popular in the state, because it literally turns delinquent properties current overnight, not only for the delinquent tax titles, but on a go-forward basis.
Right, and as far as any programs, once they are current, once they have become current in their taxes, programs would be run through the assessor's office. You know, there's multiple occasions where people can get deferrals, abatements, hardship, so that would go through the assessor's office.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
Look
you.
forward to more information. Yep. Okay, next, under public hearing presentation, we have Charlene's going to give us the landfill solar revenue sharing story.
Okay.
I know she's put a lot of time into this.
You're pretty.
And she's learned some things.
I've
along
learned
the way.
a lot doing this.
Is it up here? There you go.
Yeah, Jamie's controlling on her end the slide presentation. A brief history of how this project started. It started in 2010 with DEP encouraging solar on landfills. In August of that year, CVAC collected potential capped landfill opportunities, and it moved through the process, and Harwich joined in October of 2010. In mid-2011, CVAC awarded the contract to ACE. In July of 2011, a presentation was made to the Board of Selectmen, and the cover letter with the agreement was sent to the town administrator. Moving on, there was a groundbreaking ceremony in November of 2013, if you want to go to the next slide. And then continuing on, December 2013, consent and agreement was signed by the participants. And in August of 2014, there was a ceremony at the landfill. In October 12th, there was an aerial photo shown of everybody who participated. And the next slide, in June of 15, there was actually, the town won an award from the Environmental Energy Technology Application Achievement Award by the Environmental Business Council. Moving on, in September 2015, CVAC delivered its first year of commercial operations and reports. Very hard to read. It's more there for illustrative purposes, just to show that they submitted their report. Moving on, in the 2014 and 2015 union negotiations, there was an item in the contracts, and the language that shows here was very typical of the language that appeared in all but, I believe, one of the contracts. And it essentially says that effective no earlier than July 1, 2013, which was the beginning of FY14, the COLA, the cost of living increases, would not be implemented until such time as the power, the solar grid went online and we received a payment. That did not happen. However, there was a caveat in the union negotiations that said, however, if the solar panel revenues, electric bill credits are not received before June 30th, 2014, the 2% increase will be implemented on June 30th, 2014. So on June 30th, 2014, the unions and employees received their 2% cost of living for one day, which came to $4,882.41. For the year, for 2015, the estimated payout was $254,000. That year, we generated just over $267,000. One thing to point out, however, is that the collective bargaining agreements are funded through a combination of tax levy and local receipts, of which solar revenue is included. So even if we hadn't gone on board with the solar revenue until December of 2015, the town was still obligated as of July 1 to do the COLA increase. Moving on, the disbursement of funds between the town and the water enterprise, as determined by the power purchase agreement, the PPA. The current breakdown is based on the actual electrical use of each entity. So the town itself uses 57% of the electricity used, while the water enterprise fund uses 43% of the electricity used. Next slide. How did we get to this? Staff met to determine the breakdown utilizing the actual electrical usage of the town. Again, 57 used by town departments, 43 used by the water enterprise. Town council was asked to weigh in on how we got to this point, and I will read this verbatim. Under the solar agreement with CVEC for the closed landfill, the town receives cash payments from the utility in lieu of net metering credits. Those cash payments, however, correlate to specific electricity meters for town facilities. With respect to any meters for which the town receives a cash payment are for facilities operated by the Enterprise Fund, I agree with your opinion, and that refers to Mr. Clark's opinion, on the same rationale behind the DOR's conclusion regarding lease revenue. In the case of the Water Department, the Water Enterprise Fund pays for the electricity usage that flows through their designated meters. So any cash payment from the utility related to the Water Department meters should be treated as revenue to the Water Department and therefore deposited into the Enterprise Fund. Moving on. This is the actual kilowatt hours generated and the funds generated and received in FY15. This chart went through many, many iterations to try and make it as plain and easy as possible. So the column shows the kilowatt hours generated. The total for FY15 was 2,058,761. The total revenue generated was $267,052.56. This is where it gets a little confusing. The off-taker amount is taken off the top, and that's the $62,000. Of the remaining money, that's the $178,895 in the yellow column. When you add the 53% that the town received, and then the 43% of the non-off-taker revenue, that is the total. So the Water Enterprise Fund does not benefit from the off-taker amount. And moving on to the next slide, this shows actual and projected numbers. We have actual numbers through February, and then we projected out using last year's numbers to try and figure out where we might be, because it is an estimate with the projected, where we might be for the end of fiscal 16. And we are estimating about $290,000. Moving on, where are the expenses involved? In FY15, any expenses incurred within the lease were actually incurred by CVEC. In 2016, we budgeted $91,000 to cover the taxes. We didn't know what they were going to be. Nobody really knew what they were going to be until the assessment of the solar panels was actually completed. It actually ended up being $64,217.41. Per the CVEC lease agreement, the taxes are paid by the developer, but then we, as the town, must reimburse them. So the town has to have in the budget somewhere a funding source to cover those reimbursements. If we look at the, right now, the current tax assessment is paid 100% by the town. If the expenses were shared equally with the water enterprise, the breakdown would be approximately what we show here. We're showing $65,000 for the taxes. I rounded up, made it easier, of which $37,050 would be the town's responsibility, $27,950. We also looked at the CVEC accounting numbers, which they are not making us pay for right now. They're covering those expenses themselves. But if in the future those came to fruition, we had to cover those, and they were estimated at $20,000, the breakdown would be $11,400 for the town and $8,600 for the water department. This is the list, and I don't expect anybody to be able to read this, but we just wanted to show, the Schedule Z is what determines the accounts that are covered in the PPA. And we actually have 43 accounts, town as well as water combined. There are 43 accounts. Moving on, disbursement of funds, town water, what are some potential changes? Currently, as we explained, the water enterprise is listed on the Schedule Z. The Schedule Z is part of the power purchase agreement, the PPA, that lists the electrical accounts covered by this agreement. The Schedule Z can only be changed twice a year. In order to get the water department off the Schedule Z, the CVEC board would have to vote on the change. A concern that has been raised is that if the water enterprise is removed from the Schedule Z entirely, it could break the contract that we have with CVEC and with ACE, resulting in CVEC needing to go out and petition new off-takers. There would also be some legal fees incurred in that change, which CVEC could not absorb with their current budget, so the town would have to pay those fees. The town could assess additional indirect, some options available. The town could assess some additional indirect costs to the water department, to the water enterprise, to cover the cost of town staff. Currently, we haven't done that to date. The other is to develop an MOA, written revenue sharing, including indirect costs, i.e. administrative finance time to process. And finally, solar revenue. The solar revenue, as I stated earlier, we have overstated that currently in the budget, proposed budget for FY17 at $300,000. We will adjust those revenues and reduce the number down $10,000 as we're projecting approximately $290 in revenue for FY16 and offset other revenue sources such as ambulance and solid waste. We do not need to do a budget amendment for that change. And I do want to thank Liz Argo, the town administrator, and the finance director, and Peter, for their insistence on helping me understand this, because a lot of this was Greek to me, the off-taker versus the non-off-taker, and I've actually learned quite a bit through this process. So if there are any questions, Chris and I are both here to answer them if we can, and
Okay, can we go back to slide 10?
we can.
Is that under your control? Or? Okay, on slide 10, I just want to make sure everybody understands that the December 14 kilowatt hours generated looks like a giant number. And that, in essence, if I recall correctly, is a couple of months' worth of, like September to...
From August
yeah, whatever.
to November.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why that's such a big number. If you look year
Exactly.
over year for that number, it's a big number.
Yes.
Then if you go to slide 11, one of the bigger concerns I have is we're projecting, just based on the numbers we had, that we will generate in FY16 3.3 million kilowatt hours. If you went back to the original slide, it was really busy. The estimated output for this facility is something like 4.9 million kilowatt hours. So my first question is, I think we need to, or not question, I would just say we need to get back to CVEC and say, it looks like our system is underperforming. Now, I know we all know that the sun only shines, when it shines, and things vary and whatnot, but that's in essence only 75% of what, actually it's less than 75% of what, was advertised, if you will. And so one of the questions is, who's actually maintaining the system and monitoring it? Is there a segment that's broken or disconnected, or do they ever wash the panels on, whatever? I mean, but it is very different. It is very different. And by the way, you're right, Charlene, it's a complex complication that we have. How many off-takers? 8?
I believe it's 8, yes.
Yeah, other towns that basically participate in our solar system, they get some of the credit for the kilowatt hours generated, but then they pay us back a revenue for that, and that's not included in the net metering credit. That's a direct offset to what the town would use in its meters. But that does complicate the calculation, if you will. So
I had a eureka when I finally understood
figure that
that.
out. Yeah. No, it's difficult to understand at best. Okay. So I mean, a couple questions, I guess, is, and you point out in your slides that, we could have the water department, Water Enterprise Fund, because they're participating in the revenue stream, also participate in the expense stream, which makes a lot of sense to me. I don't know how everybody else feels about it, but it makes a lot of sense to me to at least consider that going forward. So, guys have questions?
Yeah.
Michael.
Chris, could you just touch on the DOR conclusion that Charlene spoke of that matched what your comments were? And there was also a secondary question that was asked. That we haven't gotten the answer to yet.
Well, just to be clear, we had asked the question specifically in regards to if the amount of credit that was given related to the water department could be credited back to the water department. We put that question into them, and they didn't answer. So I did take a stab, or they didn't answer one question that was really not related to what we were actually in operation here. It was more traditional to other parts of the Commonwealth. But when I posed the question directly to John Giorgio, and I did pose it again to Mr. Rashis, the gentleman at the Department of Revenue, Mr. Giorgio went through, and as Charlene had pointed out, that the rationale that I used was consistent with how other enterprise funds would deal with a similar situation. Again, I think the key to this is in some towns, they have what they call net metering credits, and those net metering credits would go directly to the water department. Here, because we have off-takers, we get cash, and how do you allocate the cash? So we allocate the cash the same way we would do the net metering credits. I don't know if I remember the second question, though, Mike.
It was a clarification because the question was if the Water Enterprise Fund generated 43%, are they entitled to 43%? And they're not generating this solar, it's being generated on landfill property.
Right, actually, that one, thank you for reminding me. So the power purchase agreement deals with the 4357, and that's just strictly a product of how much energy is going through the meters. So that's the part that I was commenting on. Mr. Rashis, in his initial evaluation, said that if the water department were to construct their own facility on water department land, could it then go back to the water department? And the question to that is absolutely. If you do a lease agreement, or if the water department did it direct, they would receive all the revenue within the enterprise fund. So he was saying that the lease agreement, which is physically where the plant is located, is relevant to where the money goes back for the purposes of the lease. So if it's on town property, then it would be or general fund, it would be a general fund obligation. If it was a water department property, it would be a water department. So that was more related to the lease and the location of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Does anybody,
We have two people in
okay, hang on a second. Does anybody have an interest in pursuing, at least having the water department or water enterprise fund participate in the expense side of the ledger?
Just, Mr. Chairman, if I could, I wouldn't mind taking a stab at doing some kind of memorandum of understanding, because, quite honestly, there was some assumptions that were made. Andy, the finance director, and I met with folks from the water department and the water commission just to kind of talk through kind of the rationale. And I think just for continuity, it would be good to have that kind of cemented, specifically the 43%. We should look at that each year, because if they do put additional electricity online, or they're looking at doing an additional storage tank that will have additional pumps, so they may go from 43 to 45, so there should be some mechanism to kind of look, to kind of have a fixed percentage and have a look-back clause. I think that makes sense. The other one that was brought up, which I think is interesting, is we don't assess any indirect costs, and yet it does cost the more so a little bit of my time, obviously Charlene's time, but more so the accountant's time, and they just get the net benefit, well, they just get the gross benefit of that, and we don't assess them anything in terms of indirect costs as it relates to the operation of the solar. Certainly, we do indirect costs as it relates to the water department operation, but not as it relates to the solar. So I think those two, we could put something together and have that back for the board to give some consideration to.
Is it possible, I'm just making this up, but Dan is here, right? Is Dan still?
Dan's
Yeah,
here.
I mean, Dan's been talking to us about, and the water commissioner's been talking to us about the new tank over in Northrop replacing, which is, I'll just call it a ground-based tank, I guess, which will be shingled, I hear. No, but it does take additional pumping because it's at ground level, basically. And so I guess the question becomes, if in fact their loads go up and ours don't, and we could find ourselves increasingly sharing more money with them, or a greater percentage with them as time goes on, does it make any sense, or is it possible to lock that number down now so that we don't, for instance, we don't exceed 43% with them? Or does it always have to be that it's based on what the loads are?
Well, I think to be a strict constructionist, you want to base it on the load, so that way if we have 43 meters, there is some opportunity, though, quite honestly, for the water department, that if they wanted to do their own small solar at that facility, at the Lothrop tank, then they could have that be all within theirs, and that operation at that meter would be something that they could collect on their own. So there would be options. The other option is that they could just add, so instead of 43, there'd be 44 meters, and then to your point, that would change the percentage. But we don't necessarily have to add a meter. There could be another way of trying to accomplish that
I understand.
if they were to do a solar on their site.
Dan, can I just ask you what size pumps you're looking at there? Or I'm assuming there's more than one pump, if I could just ask.
Yeah, there's going to be 3 pumps. Off the top of my head, I don't know the horsepower of the draw. I know we're going to be able to pump about 25 to 3,000 gallons a minute, so they're going to be pretty substantial. So
And do you think you can have enough space to put solar for that capacity there?
I'm not sure. I mean, this is, depending on where the wetland, the floodplain line is, and once we take down the existing tank, it's just site constraints at that point, so.
Okay, and just while we have you up here, would you be looking to do another, I'll just call it a CVEC type of arrangement as far as putting solar there, or is that something you're contemplating, just doing your own solar?
It's something we've been talking about. I know initially they started talking about doing solar at well 10, and then the CVEC and the whole town entered into the big agreement, and we threw all of our meters into there. This is going to provide us with another opportunity, I guess, to kind of put something on our own. So it's definitely something we're looking at. But
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Oh, just a question, or you?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I don't understand something that Chris just said. What you said was if the water department puts up their own solar panels on their property, they can take all of the credits for it and all the money for it.
Correct.
The town just put up the solar system on its property. Why do we have to share when they don't?
The loads aren't on that property.
It would only be for the tank.
It goes by the lease, Angela. What determines the location is really the lease document.
Okay.
I'm just suggesting if they wanted to do a small system,
Okay,
there's an
just-
alternate. Ideally, they would be the 44th meter, and we would just wrap them into the program.
It just struck me that it was
Maureen?
back
Thank you for being patient.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I will say that I manage the solar facility, the accounting for the solar facility for another town on the Cape, so I come at this with a little background. I'd like to first address some of the questions on the potential changes. The town that I work for has already done 3 revisions of their Schedule Z, and CVAC was far more lenient in the beginning. A lot of these Schedule Zs in the beginning, they were made up by CVAC directors who weren't familiar with the electric accounts. They were made up by accountants who weren't familiar with this. You know, it takes some fine tuning to get the understanding of the PPA to coincide with the actual Schedule Z. I do understand that CVAC is probably not going to be that lenient going forward. So they probably would have to vote, but I mean, it's not, you know, a vote like that's earth-shattering. You know, I sense a little negativity in the comments. As far as breaking the contract, if a building opens or closes, I have a library coming on in July, that's going to break the contract. You know, I have to add that account to that town's Schedule Z. So breaks in the contract are going to happen routinely, and that's one of the things that CVAC is going to have to, as they go forward, work out a method for handling. It's all new industry. So these things that seem negative, you know, aren't that shocking. You know, it's just going along. All right, so to cut to the chase, I would ask that we move, no, this slide. If we were to look at the last column, the non-off-taker revenue for the water department, if we took that, we being the town, as off-taker revenue, we'd get 50% of that. So that would be about $71,000. If we were to add that to the $291 that we're currently getting, that would be about $360,000. Less our tax payment, that would be the $300,000, which has been the desired goal all along. Then the
go ahead.
water department could, if they chose, become off-takers. That way, they would then get the other 50% of that 141 or 71. So the town as a whole would still be taking in the same amount of money, just the distribution would change. And of course, the water department could take that arrangement, or they could go on their own, or they could, you know, really do whichever was best for them to do. So I'm suggesting as a way to get back to the town's original proposition that we consider making the water department off-takers, should they choose, or dropping them from the list and somebody else will fill that role and we'll still get the $71,000. And I would also just end by keeping in mind that whatever decisions we make in this situation will affect in the future our sewer pumps.
So for the town that you're working in, what is the water department, or what happens with the water department there?
We don't even have water.
Oh, okay, then you just identify where you are, okay, yeah, all right. Yeah, okay, Chris.
Mr. Chairman, I certainly am not engaged in fear-mongering, and actually, when we started initially.
you were.
Yeah, no, but I appreciate the comment. When we started initially, we actually inherited the middle school, so we made a change, and when you make a change in the electric consumption, that's fairly minimal. If you want to call it within 5%, you're not going to generate any real significant interest. I'm not sure in this contract, I've read other electric contracts, when you go and make a change that's above 10 or 15%, now it's an order of magnitude that they can come in and potentially renegotiate the rate with you. And if we were to totally remove the water department at 43%, that's going to hit that threshold of over 10.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason for saying it, because it is kind of a large customer, those meters, that would probably trigger. And actually,
right.
Liz Argo at CVAC did look at that and said that would
Right,
happen.
right. But I mean, it would be just like if this project had started 3 years before that and we had the high school on the list. You know, you wouldn't just carry an empty meter and get no value from it, you know, rather than,
Yeah.
you know, change the list
Yeah, but to be clear, just to be clear, the off-taker amount,
of 141.
no, the off-taker amount of 103,
Where are you at 103?
103, the third column. Or column 2.
column,
All right, I'm looking at column 5, 43% of non-off.
no, go back to column 2, which is the off-taker amount.
Right,
That amount from the off-takers comes to Harwich as a revenue.
So what's the 141 on this chart?
Hang on a second, I'm
All
gonna,
right.
just bear with me, okay, because I think there's a nomenclature issue here. So the off-takers who participate in our solar system, that are other towns,
Right.
basically, they pay us this revenue.
Right,
That is not counted in the 43% that goes to the
Right.
water department.
correct.
So that 103, 09, 91, 65 goes directly to our general fund.
Correct.
The net metering credit part, which both the town and the water department share, they split 47, 43. The net metering part is what, for the water department, is what column 5 is.
Right.
Right?
So, right. So for the town right now, we're getting column 2 plus column 3.
Yes.
For our revenue.
Yes.
And I'm suggesting that if, of this 141,000, if they were listed as off-takers or not on the list, or if anybody was listed as off-takers, we would then garner an additional 71,000 solely for us.
I understand, I just
Okay.
don't, what I don't know if an entity within the town, a town entity within the town can be an off-taker. I don't know that answer.
I believe the answer is yes, but certainly everything
well, I mean,
has to
that's
be
worth pursuing. I mean, that's-
double-checked. And also, as I say, eventually this will hit us with the sewer too, with all those pumps.
So in the town that you're familiar with that has no water.
Yes.
Do you have any in-town off-takers
We have off-takers.
in the town,
No, not in the town.
other towns?
Yes.
Okay, so you don't have the situation where we're trying to do this at the moment.
Our situation is completely different. It's Eastingham. We don't get cash. We actually get credits. It's a place nobody wants to be. We're the only town like that, and part of my familiarity has been
Yeah, okay.
because I've had to get
And it's
familiar
a
with
much
it.
small, is it a much smaller system?
It's the smallest on the Cape. It's only 641 megs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Comments are appreciated. Mr. Gunderson, how are you?
Good, Mr. Chairman, thank you. My name is Richard Gunderson. I hate to do this, but I'm coming from a totally different direction, similar to what I just heard Angelo say. I did a lot of research into this project and the basis for it way back to when we got rid of the windmill idea, or the turbine idea. And I did some investigation into every document I could find in the town, including all the Board of Water Commissioners minutes from 2009 to the present. Let me tell you, that was a lot of fun reading that. And I didn't see any reference at all in the Water Commissioners meetings, for example, in their minutes, that they expected any share of any of this solar facility. In talking with Alan Thompson, which he may change his mind, but at least when I talked to him originally, and also Dave Ryan, who went around and collected the information, the original information on electric meter accounts, that in general, that was to size the project. Now, I don't know about the CVAC agreement. I don't know how they do it. So my push has been to look at the documents, and so far the documents all say up until a certain point that $300,000 total revenue should go to the general fund, no sharing. Then in roughly April of 2015, I see in the Board of Water Commissioners meeting minutes just a one sentence. The topic of solar revenues was discussed along with how the solar revenues will be allocated. The only person there was the town administrator. There wasn't any liaison. So I'm not sure whether he remembers what happened or not, but there's no details. So that's the first time since 2009 that there's been any reference in the Board of Water Commissioners. There's a heck of a lot of references, though, as was just referred to by Dan, of a lot of independent projects on their own property and on their own facilities. And that made sense. They were looking at all kinds of wells, buildings, and everywhere else where they own the land, they could lease the land, they could create their own electricity and use it to offset their high electric bills. But nothing in sharing with the town. Okay, then, the last time I spoke on this subject, I referred you and the town administrator to a decision or an opinion by John Giorgio of 2012, which basically said you might want to share it with the town if it comes in cash. If it comes in net meterings, you have to, because it's assigned to the meter. And at that time, Mr. Chairman, you asked the town administrator to have the town council revisit that opinion. Well, the opinion that was posted up on the chart over there doesn't say anything about the previous opinion. It doesn't relate to how he changed his mind from might to must. So I'm not sure he was ever asked to revisit his opinion. In the trail of emails that I have seen, he essentially was given a copy of the conditions of this solar project that was sent to Tony Rashias at the Department of Revenue. Then he chose to comment on it back to the town administrator, where it's said exactly what you had up there. But it went on. It went on another sentence, which wasn't on that slide. So I guess I could ask the town administrator, or I can read it. What else did Mr. Giorgio say in that email of February 3rd? Charlene, or?
I don't have it with me.
What it says is, please let me know if you hear from the Department of Revenue, and if so, whether the Department of Revenue disagrees. To me, that suggests that he's coming across with his opinion, but there's a crack in the window here, and he's saying, tell me what they said. And if they disagreed, maybe I have to reassess my decision. So, my question is, why is it that we never got an answer back from the Department of Revenue when both the finance director and the town administrator sent requests for verification, for decisions 3 months ago, January 14th?
I can't speak for
I
the
know.
town, the
I know.
Department of Revenue.
Well,
I can't speak for the Department of Revenue. Okay.
okay. Well, I did.
Chris, you might want to tell us about your interaction with them.
Yeah, actually, just in terms of, it's not unusual that if a town puts in a request to Department of Revenue, that because they're determining policy for the entire state, that they won't always weigh in. So it's not unusual that they won't comment on something. Is that a good answer? It's the reality of where we are. Just one thing that actually Richard brought up that was interesting. I think that when I was obviously I served as the interim water superintendent, and I think I was at a water superintendent at one of the meetings of the commission, and they asked me the question about, if we have meters, why aren't we getting our fair share? And that got me started thinking about this process. So that meeting, I don't remember the date that you had in there, but I think that's what got me started into how are we allocating this and having a discussion, and certainly Andy's been here for most of those discussions, but that's what kind of prompted me to get started on it. They asked, are we getting our fair share? And that's probably what started us looking at the topic in more detail.
It is. It's just, it probably is, except
The other thing I would say, though, is that the little bit of information I have says that the Department of Revenue is finding these situations all over the state. And my understanding, I can't cite where it's from, it may have come from MMA, we were there, is that they're working on trying to come up with guidelines, because there are so many of these things around the state now, and these questions are being asked, and that they need to develop a policy. I mean, it should be fairly straightforward, you would think.
well, I do, and I do think it is, because the response that Mr. Rashias gave to Andy Gould was essentially, if the property was transferred to the enterprise fund that's generating this revenue, or paid for with general fund revenue, or the property is not dedicated to the enterprise services use, then the lease revenue goes into the general fund. He has very specific tests in this reference that he gave to back to the town, which was forwarded to Mr. Giorgio. Mr. Giorgio read it, he forwarded it on to Chris. Was the property leased, bought by enterprise fund money? No. Is the property or equipment currently maintained by the Water Enterprise Fund? No. It's right along with what Angela was saying. It's town property. So at least it raises the possibility, as uncomfortable as it may be for the water department, that they may have to go get their own off-taker credits or pay for their own electricity other ways. This really could be totally in the general fund. And I don't think we've gotten a complete answer yet. And let me just conclude with this. This is $430,000 a year we're talking about, over 20 years. It's $9 million. Don't you think we should spend a little more time finding out what is the correct answer? I'm not asking for it to belabor it forever and ever, but Giorgio says, let me know when you hear from them. I'm saying that Tony Rashias is saying, I haven't had any further communication with the town from January 14th. He responded to me on that. So there's a disconnect of 3 months. I just think it would be worthwhile to clarify that so that for the next 20 years, there's no issue.
We can invite him down to our solar facility, for instance.
I'll bring the coffee and donuts.
I do want to, I don't want to protract this, and certainly we can try to follow up with Mr. Rashius and see if he would be willing to kind of pontificate on this. I think it's important to remember, though, that there's two different contracts that are in play here. One contract is the lease. Where the lease is, when it's on town property, the lease is related to the town. If it was on water property, it would be related to the water. It's the power purchase agreement that's actually relevant. As you heard when Noreen got up, if it was a net metering credit, then the credit would be given to the water department. Because we have off-taker and we get cash, in order to treat them the same way as if it were a net metering credit, we have to give them an allocation of the cash. So we're talking about two different agreements, and the way they're handled is two different ways. And that's all I wanted to just comment.
Okay, but I think we should, let's reach out and try and invite this guy down, actually. I mean, if he'll come down and talk to us, even during the day.
Sure.
I'd be happy to talk to him.
Okay. And I do back up what Noreen said. Some of the points on that slide number 15, I'm not sure, just my feeling, I'm not sure why you're bringing in a consideration of changing indirect charges to the water department. That should be settled in its own separate MOA, and I don't understand why you're combining it with a way of compensating for money that we're giving them on the one hand, taking it away from them on another hand by upping their costs and upping their charges. That's what I read in that statement. It just doesn't seem the way to treat a fellow department. Because you've got it in both the last two bullets. Town can assess additional indirect costs and develop an MOA sharing, including the indirect costs. The MOA is really how we set up this solar facility, how it should be run and how it's going to be distributed. I don't understand why indirect costs become a part of that. Whatever's right is right. If the town gets the full general fund distribution, that's the end of it. If we share it, we share it. There shouldn't be any adjustments in my mind on the indirect costs. That's a separate issue. Angelo's been trying to do that for years. Dave Ryan set it up probably 10 or 12 years ago when he was here. It's gone through some adjustments, but it ought to be done correctly and according to what the actual charges are, not fudging it to make it comply with the extra funds that you lost in the off-taker amounts. Thank you. Appreciate the time.
Your question?
Just for clarification on the indirect cost, it's the cost that administration is currently going through, the accounting and the finance. It's just making sure that if there is an expense, if there's revenue on one side, that the expenses get paid also.
Related directly to the solar.
Not trying to double dip or. Correct.
No, we actually, just for clarification, we actually had Liz Argo in here during these discussions over the last, it seems like the last year, about CVEC basically being squeezed on their budget and whatnot. And she ended up giving us information that said if they had to do this accounting for the off-takers in the Harwich system, and we paid them to do it, it would be something in the order of $20,000, don't remember? Or 21,000, something like that. So we actually had that information. Because it isn't just you get the bill and pass it on. There's a lot of things that go in here. Yes, sir. You've been patient.
Okay. Hi, I'm Bruce Page, and you just led into one of my questions. Before I start, I would love the idea of the solar panels and the fact that we're getting solar credits and we're saving the environment. But I think this is such a complicated kind of system and issue. Do we have a specific person in the town that is in charge or the focus of any questions that come up with this? Have we assigned anybody within the town?
We have an energy committee. I mean, that's a starting point. We do have an energy committee in this town that should be very familiar, you know, with this system. I know a lot about it, but I'm not the expert at it, so.
Okay, because I appreciate what you're going through. I have no idea what all these special terms mean. But one of the other questions I've got is that, do we get checks monthly from these, or is this a once a year check?
Basically monthly.
Okay.
The
Now,
the revenues you see there are broken down by month.
And that was a check?
Those represent basically.
Physical check.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, do they send along a report of issues or the kilowatts that were generated for someone within Harwich to verify?
Okay, there's actually, and I haven't done it in a long time, but there's actually a way to remotely look at what's going on with that system. I know I have a password and whatnot, and I probably haven't used it in a year because there were some hiccups with it. But there is a way that you can go online and look at it. It's run by Draper. Is that the name of the company that's the contractor? That CVEC hires, not us, CVEC.
Okay.
They had the responsibility for providing this, I just call it remote monitoring, if you will. But basically what you'd find is when you drive into the transfer station, you go by the shack, before you make the turn to the left to go up the, up by where the transfer station actually is, you'll see a pole with a couple cans on it. Those are the meters for our system, basically. And that information gets ported somewhere remotely. This outfit Draper then manipulates it, if you will, and it goes to a site that someone can actually get to.
Okay, that'd be great. Is there any way that we could get CVEC to put a little monitor up on that billboard that we go by and say, here's the latest?
I think CVEC,
Kilowatt hours generated?
with their financial situation, would probably say we're not going to do that. But one of the questions becomes, can we go through the exercise and make it available on our website, for instance? Go ahead, Cheryl.
There may be an actual link that we can put on the website. You can't manipulate it, you can just see what it's doing.
Yeah, so you'd see right now it's
Yeah.
putting out, well, right now it's putting out nothing, but I mean, during the course of any day, it might be putting out, 2.8 megawatts or something at this point in time, and maybe for the day it's produced so many thousands of kilowatt hours, that type of thing.
Okay. And the other
And by the way, excuse me, we don't operate the facility. It's operated by the folks that have the operating contract, not us, that, to make sure that things are, working, and if some alarm shows up, they go and respond and fix a fuse or whatever it is.
Okay, but I think we need to have some liaison so that they've got a person within Harwich to talk to every time.
Well, it has been Larry, but he's not as active in the energy group. Larry
And
was the guy for a long time.
if I missed it, I didn't see any kind of discussion in the annual report from that group or committee. Was there anything mentioned about the solar
I don't know, I'd go back and look at it.
credits?
Did they file a report?
I don't know.
I would assume they did, but I don't know. Meant to go back and look.
I thought something that important would really show up in the annual report.
Yeah, well, we have a nice sign out there you probably saw many times.
I do, every week.
It tells you the size of it, and by the way, it does say the projected annual savings, $300,000.
Right.
And I will point out one thing, and that is that when we first started this, 300,000 was the total number we thought it was gonna be. Because when we first started out, I think we thought we were getting all the revenue. And I know in the first year, the system exceeded what we certainly expected, and even now it's exceeding what we expected for dollars. But as I pointed out on one of the slides here, that the estimated total kilowatt hours for the year doesn't look right to me. It looks understated, or there's something wrong with the system or something.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else on this topic? Gary, how are you?
Very good, thank you. How are you doing tonight?
Great.
Gary Carrero, Harwich Board of Water Commissioners. I just have a couple of questions. Chris, earlier you mentioned you had a meeting with yourself, Andy, and the Water Commissioners regarding CVAC. Oh, I think yeah, you thinking of the indirect meeting that we had?
No, actually, well, it may have been, Andy was there too. We had a meeting, it wasn't with the whole commission, only one member of the commission showed up, and I think it was Danette, and
Okay.
it was Sandy and Dan, and just to talk about indirects, and I thought we did discuss the solar at that same meeting.
Okay. The other comment too would be, with Mr. Gunterson, we did mention to Chris at one meeting about if we're participating in CVAC, are we entitled to any revenue or wattage or anything? I think that's what started you looking into it. By no means are we trying to take anything from the town that we are not, well, there's been some comments made, and I just want to clarify that. What Mr. Gunterson said, what's right and what's fair is fair. And if we're not entitled to it, by all means, you should have it. And if we have the ability to start a solar field and take some of the care of the electric costs that we have, then maybe that's something we should look into. But again, what is fair, and we're certainly not looking to take something that we're not supposed to have. I just
And
want to clarify.
We
make sure.
understand that, and we also would expect that, because you're now participating in it, that would get reflected in the water rates,
Right.
quite frankly, I mean. So. Thank you. Anybody else on that topic? Okay, let's move on to old business. Board has some articles for the annual town meeting to get through. First one is Article 4, the town operating budget. Chris, you have any update on?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
Changes or-
I just wanted to cover two things on this. We did pass out the material on your, what we refer to as the one-liners, and we have the amounts in here for the different categories. I thought I saw the accountant here. I just wanted to, he is here. I just wanted to make sure that we have the numbers, and I think we're missing a total here. But we have 33,180,977 to come out of tax levy, 633,400 to come from CPC. Now, that actually is going to be funded out of Article 27. That's the land bank debt service. And then the water enterprise indirect cost of 587,382. The local receipts at 10,022,278. And then others, which is really betterments and things of that nature, are 596,244. So I believe the combination of those five numbers that I read constitutes the total of the operating budget. And we just didn't subtotal that, but I just wanted to give him an opportunity to look at it. While he's looking at those numbers.
We can come back to it, of course.
Yeah, you had asked me, Mr. Chairman, in terms of the tax rate for setting the 16 tax rate, that in terms of, we did have a little bit of an issue in setting the 16 tax rate, and what impact does that have? I made a mistake when I was talking to Michael, who had asked the same question. I want to take this opportunity to kind of correct that. When we set the tax rate, which is really in December, in FY16 tax rate was set in December, basically what I'll just go through, that we sent in the material. It's literally done electronically. The message came back that we were out of whack by 500,000. What the software had done is it appeared that CPC funds were being used to offset the general fund, which you can't do. It's just not something that's allowed. So what the finance director did was he knew that on our local receipts that we were having really high local receipts in some areas, that we had the capacity to make up for that by increasing local receipts by 500,000. So he did that by increasing our local receipts. When the representative of Department of Revenue came out, they realized this CPC issue, but we had already set the tax rate, so that when it was submitted at $9.21, and by basically, instead of having property tax meet 500,000, actually it was the local receipts. That had the impact of dropping the rate down to 907. What that also did, though, as a result, was that 500,000 plus a few other things, we ended up with what's called additional taxing capacity. So we went to 678,000 in additional taxing capacity. I think I provided the slides where historically we've only had about 25,000 or less, This year, for the end of, or setting the tax rate in 16, it was, we created that capacity of 678,000. Now, we have that capacity available, so what does that mean? That means that for FY '17, and I think what I said to Michael was FY '18, and that's where I want to correct myself. When we set the tax rate in FY '17, we'll have Proposition 2.5, the typical amount, plus new growth, and we will now have that 678,000 available for setting the tax rate in '17. Now, the town could make a decision to use that towards doing it, or we could take a portion of it and do it over the next couple years. So there will be some opportunity. So the 500,000 basically went from going from local receipts to additional taxing capacity. And I know that you had wanted an explanation. Hopefully the one page was, as I'm saying this, it sounds more convoluted, but I'm trying to keep it simple. But in essence, that's what's transpired.
Okay, so do you want to wait till Andy gets back and checks those numbers on the operating budget?
Yes.
Okay, can we then move on to Article, it's okay to move on to Article 32, West Harwich Schoolhouse Preservation and Rehabilitation. Want to make a motion?
For discussion purposes, sure. I move that we accept and adopt Article 32, West Harwich Schoolhouse Preservation and Rehabilitation, in the amount of $203,500 out of CPA funds.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded, accept and adopt $203,500 for the West Harwich Schoolhouse CPA funds. Discussion? Mike?
If I may, I have a few on this. This is, was applied for as a joint application. I think in a conversation I had with Lou about a month ago, he had expressed that he never intended on it being a joint application. I asked Chris about it, and Chris had expressed that he wanted to head off any concerns from the board on the prior project, South Harwich Meeting House. The board discussed it and allowed them to file the application so that they could get in on deadlines. But we, the board, had never voted to make this a joint project. So that's one. On the project itself, because it is a town project now and been applied for as a town project, and looking at Lou's proposal and the numbers, don't we have to follow prevailing wage? And there's some criteria that I got from the state on prevailing wage, and if you follow the test, it seems as though we do. So should we get a legal opinion on that? Because Lou's quotes are based on volunteer.
Yeah, just in terms of that, through you, Mr. Chairman, absolutely, if the town contracts with somebody to come in and do the work, prevailing wage has to be involved in that. If the town is to receive volunteer labor, then that would not be prevailing wage because it's volunteer labor. If the town were to use the prison labor, that would not be prevailing wage. If the town were to use Cape Tech and have the kids come in and do certain, that would not be prevailing wage. And it's my understanding as I read the proposal that that's what he's looking at. So projects that are related to town funds going to independent private contractors, absolutely positively, from $1, prevailing wage has to be involved. From volunteer efforts, then there is no prevailing wage for volunteers.
Does that mean the septic system has to go to someone with prevailing wage?
Well, that's a good question. If somebody donated and said, I want to come in and I want to give a gift to the town, and I want to give a gift of a septic system to the town, then the Board of Selectmen, under the gift statute, would have to accept the gift. If the board accepted the gift, then that would be a gift and that work would be done. So there would be no paying because it's a gift. If the town said, well, we need to go out and have this installed, and we did a bid, then absolutely, that would be prevailing wage.
Michael?
So in 2008, when AM Fogarty did their bid on this, every piece of it was
Was
prevailing
prevailing
wage.
wage, yes.
So in speaking to the Mass Division of Labor Standards and outlining the circumstances of this proposal, number one they came up with was, is this project construction? Yes, so it falls under prevailing wage. Is this project public works? Yes, the building belongs to the town of Harwich. Is this project being undertaken by a public entity? And the answer is yes. I don't see under Mass General Law 149-26-7 where it says you can use volunteers. And the prevailing wage laws are pretty specific. So I think we need to get a legal opinion on that. I don't see anywhere in there where you can just decide on a town project that you're not going to follow prevailing wage regardless of volunteers. As a matter of fact, I don't think you're allowed to use volunteers.
Well, we're probably going to disagree on that, but in the determination, I asked Attorney Giorgio, relevant to the Albro House, in terms of can we accept a gift and have that work be done, and he said yes. I can't remember the exact statute for the acceptance of a gift. It's not under that, obviously.
Wasn't the Albro House a paint job, not a construction job?
If you follow the strict interpretation of prevailing wage, painting's construction, yeah.
I'd request that we would get a legal opinion on that. And then the second would be the contamination that was spoken about at the Housing Committee meeting. Tom Peterson, or actually at this meeting, Tom Peterson brought up the plume and the denial of a housing project that was out there, and I'm glad to see Paula here. There's a lot of talk, and I noticed in the memo that was in this week's packet on the pollution. I believe that just says that we're not responsible for the pollution. And it was also mentioned that there was pollution at a depth, but there was also a lot of air quality mentions that they were doing air quality tests in houses in that whole area. Has that been re-looked at? Is that a concern?
My recollection of the 2012 report that looked at, I guess, the test results in the wells and whatnot, is that the plume of pollution is below the groundwater lens, I guess you'd describe it. And if I read that correctly, it said, well, therefore, that's not a topic. There were some houses apparently closer to the Herring River as the plume comes up, if you will, to get to the Herring River, where I think they did some sampling. You know, I think I remember seeing that. You know, if we'd like to declare a public health emergency in West Harwich, I guess we could do that. But I read the report as being that it's not an issue for that particular site, but maybe I'm reading it wrong.
And the 2001 report that's on the DEP website, it actually lists recommendations. And it is a recommendation that in-plume microwells within the study area, and it lists them all, and that's included, be monitored for future migration of dissolved PCE, TCE, groundwater plume. In addition, wells installed along North Road. And then it says, air monitoring of residences along North Road, 61, 65, 93 North Road, should be continued on a quarterly basis. Additional indoor air sampling should be conducted. And then it lists, as a point of reference, Paula Champagne.
Well,
And it was
the
from
date?
2001.
Yeah, in 2012.
I read that report,
Yeah.
and it doesn't say anything about it's gone. It says that
Well,
we're not responsible.
It's not there. I mean, it's not gone. The stuff, whatever it is still there.
Okay, so we're willing to look at that last report and make a decision to spend taxpayers' dollars on,
In my opinion, is you go with the latest data you have. I mean, that's,
or get new.
I mean, if you want to drag this out, I guess we could test all of West Harwich. We should go to the Hetch property and say, is there a plume there? I mean,
Well,
quite
I'm
frankly.
talking about the project at hand. I'm not
I
talking about
understand.
West Harwich.
Well, look at the plume.
It is
If you
outside
look
of
at the
the
graphic
plume.
of the plume.
Yeah,
you
I
got that?
absolutely have,
Pull it
but
up.
this is the project we're talking about.
Pull it up.
Can I ask you a question? Looking at Paula, I know that you were involved with this heavily years ago. Do you recall, well, at least I recall, that plume itself wasn't the driver of that program being stopped? There were other things that were involved. Are you in a position to be able to make a comment about that, or has it been so long ago? Thank you, by the way.
Hello, Paula. Good evening.
Hello,
Welcome.
good evening. First of
Sorry to
all,
put you on the spot.
regarding monitoring, to my knowledge, there's not been any additional monitoring. The 2012 report was done for the proposed redevelopment of that site. There's not been any additional monitoring in that area. To my knowledge, there's not been any additional monitoring of the houses along Herring River since the 2001 project and when we first identified the issues. The question arises whenever anyone looks at the West Harwich site, what about the plume? Is that the end-all of any redevelopment on this site? No. What you need to do is to be aware of the situation, and the West Harwich Schoolhouse Preservation members have had some conversation with me on this very topic to ask my opinion of what's the current status. My suggestions to them or anyone looking at this site is you need to sit down with an environmental consultant and have them review the project to date and see how this would affect what you are proposing to redevelop at the site. It does not mean that it's a site that has to be capped over and a monument put on it. If you want to redevelop the site, if you are digging into the ground, if you are going to put in a foundation, one of the concerns in redevelopment of a site in our porous soils is the migration of fumes and going into confined spaces. Well, if you're going to redevelop a site, there are ways for an engineer to look at that and to design according to the latest technology to make sure that you're installing the proper barriers so that if you have a foundation, it's not going to become a void space and collection of fumes. The groundwater should be deep enough under that site, and the site would be on town water, that's not going to be an issue. Developing a septic system should not be an issue because the septic systems are always placed 5 feet above the layer of groundwater. Unless you had a very, very large discharge on that site, which would momentarily affect the groundwater, we call it groundwater mounding, if you had a huge discharge, then it should not be an issue. But again, I recommend that anyone looking at this site speak with a qualified environmental consultant specializing in hazardous wastes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Richard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Richard Gunderson again. The use of sheriff's inmates, if you do get up on the website, bsheriff.net, it gives you a pretty good outline of what their capabilities are, what they can do, and what they really don't want to do. But if you look at it closely, there's a lot of things that are very variable. I mean, they say small groups may not show up. They depend on the weather, the traffic, whatever. They're out of down by the canal.
Also depends on who the incarcerated people are, the population at that point in time, I think.
Well, there's other things too. Scheduling of the work could become pretty difficult. There are times when the number of available community service inmates drops to 4 to 3 or less. Less inmates on the crew means we have to postpone work on your project. The demand for community service crews is high, especially during the late spring, summer, and early fall. That's when this project is supposed to get kicked off. The other one that bothers me is they talk about inmates cannot work they cannot work with children. Now, I'm not saying they're young kids, but these high school kids that may be coming from the tech school, do they qualify as children? I don't know. But obviously you wouldn't want them in the same premises.
I think you keep them separate if you need to.
Yeah,
Schedule them on different times.
That's true.
I'm just
But
saying.
right now, that's what the rules of their website say. The Coastal Engineering did an inspection as well, as long as we're talking about some of the material that supports this project. Coastal Engineering did a study back in 2007. And it was, if you ever get a chance to look at it, it's a very visual inspection. They didn't poke or prod or test anything. It's totally observations. And that was 9 years ago. And even then, they talked about some of the degradation of the roof structure and needed to be done right away to prevent further leakage. Some of the highlights of their study really focused similar to what I believe you saw at the South Harwich Meeting House. The foundation was a mess. It's falling apart. They talk about the lack of load-bearing walls, the fact that they don't have footings, the fact that they need lally columns. So this whole building very well might need to be either elevated or seriously built up from the ground up. I'm just doing this because there's a lot of things that this sheriff's department probably is not capable to do, and you probably wouldn't want them to do it. So you've got basic stuff right away in the structural construction of this project. And the prevailing wage, I wanted to read one thing. This is a quote, so I didn't write it, but I kind of believe it. Keep in mind that this law was enacted in 1914. That's the prevailing wage law. It was based on a rationale that still applies today, that the government should use its substantial buying power to enhance the welfare of workers and their families, encourage a highly skilled workforce, to build and maintain the state's infrastructure, and promote competition among bidders for public projects based on skill and efficiency, not on lowering workers' wages simply to cut costs. I think the voters in this town need to realize that public money, CPA and state money, is being used. It needs to be put into the public workers' pockets. That's what makes this economy grow. Conducting this size of a public project with voluntary labor, I don't think does that. So we're really violating the intent of the prevailing wage, even if we don't have to cover it on all elements. And that's something you have to think about when you're voting for it, and they have to think about it when they're voting for it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mel? Oh, Don, didn't see you back there. How are you?
You stay in this town long enough, you get involved in all kinds of stuff. I could shed light on a couple of issues here. I was on the West Harwich School Building Committee in the 90s, and there was a lot of misinformation about that building and its unsuitability to be occupied. At the time, we did get somebody to go in and ascertain what was going on with the building. It has a cracked main floor joist. It is not in horrendous shape and about ready to fall into itself. Secondarily, and this is going to be something that Mr. Hughes was involved with, we have a long tradition in this town of projects that are on town property where people volunteer their labor. The playground was built, and I believe I saw Mr. Hughes there a couple of days himself volunteering his labor. I agree, from my own background in contracting with the federal government, that the idea of prevailing wage was to maintain a viable and vibrant workforce, but it wasn't supposed to impose that onto a situation where people who were willing to volunteer their own sweat equity to do something. We have other projects that we've done with volunteer labor, and it doesn't mean that you're precluded from accepting that. It's just an alternate to the extent that you're willing to grant a license or whatever to the group to be able to accomplish that.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we have a motion before us, and that's to accept and adopt Article 32, which is the West Harwich Schoolhouse Preservation and Rehabilitation. It's the motion is $203,500 from CPC funds. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay, it's 3-1 in favor. So, okay, Chris, you have a clarification on the budget, or do you want us to keep going on?
Yeah, no, actually, I do. The number is, I just want to correct the two numbers I think I got wrong here. So the total amount of the budget is $33,180,977.
So the request and your recommendation is listed in our sheet are correct?
Correct.
The first two
Yeah,
columns?
it's just the breakdown
Okay,
that's
all right.
off a little bit.
Just trying to get them right.
3180, 977.
So which one's changed?
So actually, the tax levy amount should be 19,664,594.
Wait a minute, my pen's dying.
And then actually,
Okay, 19 million what?
$19,664,594.
Okay.
And then actually, the other column, if we include in some of the state aid, should be $2,273,323.
Which other column?
In the last column, it says other.
Oh, other, okay.
So it was
596
596.
changes
is
to what?
$2,273,323. And the combination of those numbers should total up to the $33,180,977.
Okay, and the good news is, up until the night of town meeting, we can always adjust it if we need to.
We can.
So, okay, so with that, could I get a motion to adopt the operating budget? Anybody?
I move that we adopt the
Angela.
operating budget.
Second.
See how easy that one is? So I think what Angela did, so moving second, I think what Angela did was to move that we adopt the operating budget, which totals $33,180,977, of which 19,664,594 comes from tax levy.
Million.
Huh? 19 million, yeah.
That number doesn't, I think,
Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me, 19,664,594 from tax levy. Dan, is there a clarification here?
yeah, the clarification is that on the CPC funds, I think we do have it listed here, the 633,400, that actually is going to be appropriated under Article 27. So I just want to make sure we make the notation.
It's not included in the 33, right?
Correct.
Now you know why I didn't go with the
Correct.
numbers.
Okay, all right, so I'm going to continue on with, also included from Water Enterprise Fund, 587,382. Local receipts, 10,022,278. And other, 2,273,373, is that correct?
323,
323, sorry. Is that correct?
that's correct.
And again, the total is $33,180,977. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, we'll put that to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's a vote, thank you. Okay, we will move on now to, bear with me, Article 34, South Harwich Meeting House Restoration and Preservation. Could I have a motion on this, please?
I move that we accept and adopt Article 34, South Harwich Meeting House Restoration and Preservation for the amount of $100,000 payable from CPA funds.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded, Article 34, the South Harwich Meeting House Restoration and Preservation, $100,000 to be funded through CPA funds. Discussion. We had a chance to view that this evening. It was great. The good news is it's not leaking anymore that we know of, so it's getting there. If you'd like to come on up, your chance.
Who made the motion in second?
Michael and Angelo.
Michelangelo.
Michelangelo.
Michelangelo, yeah.
These are just some papers that I drew up to explain the finances and bring everybody up to date on to
Okay.
the current. I will probably have to explain to you how I did it, so.
Thanks.
Just in case it doesn't make sense to anyone.
This is not an Excel spreadsheet?
Yes, sort of.
Oh, okay. So Dana, your question will now be answered as to what's going on there.
I just want to thank the board also for visiting the building. I think there is nothing like a visual to see what's really going on, and I appreciate the interest in being able to look at it in detail, because it makes it a lot easier for me to describe the project, especially to you. The first paper that I gave you was a progress report. It's basically our building report, our building permit narrative. I printed in red, so you'll be able to see what has actually been accomplished as a year ago when we received this permit. Many things have been accomplished other than what's on this sheet, but that just makes the narrative up to date. It's followed by the building permit. It's followed then by the three pages of
the actual funding through the CPA, and how much we've spent, exactly where it's spent on, and what the balances are. So having said that, the very last page, which is probably the most interesting, gives I came to the selectmen in September 28th of 2015. At that time, I submitted a current contractor estimates. So for the purpose of comparison, I left that on the top. Where it is in red part way down, you'll see the selectmen's report for tonight, additional contractor estimates showing what all the orders of things coming up and what they cost are. It's followed by the total amount that we feel we need to finish the entire project. And then after that, it's the actually updated funds paid by the Friends within the last 3 months of $18,922.88 paid by us toward the project. And the only other thing you may really want to know, I think, is the CPA total budget right now between the two different articles we have remaining is $38,274.40. And that total committed for the finishing of the sprinkler system, the heating, air conditioning, plumbing, dehumidifier, the actual Garaventa elevator lift, and a lift door change order actually pretty much expends all of that. So everything you see on the listing that I just gave you, your back page, updates everything else.
Okay, so the magic question from us, $100,000 or something, excuse me, passes the town meeting, will that get the project finished in your
Yes,
opinion?
yes.
In your opinion?
We are also going to be fundraising in the spring. We've got a fundraiser we're working on planning for June and probably another in September to actually, subsist with that should we need it. But I do think it's important to note that when this project started in 2005 with 5 people, the building had really been owned by the town, but pretty much abandoned for 13 years. We waited 2 years to get it going, and when we finally did and got it lifted in the end of 2010 into 11, it's been basically about 5 years that we've done the major amount of the work. And it is a phenomenal project and a phenomenal building for the town.
Okay, are you paying prevailing wage just for,
We haven't been, when we started, we pretty much were paying everything out of our own pocket. And then our understanding was if it was anything under $25,000 would not fit that category. So that's pretty much how we've done this whole project.
that's another question, I guess, I don't know if that's right or
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
Was your application a joint application, or was it for your group?
When we originally started, the town put it out for public bid for a private developer to take it over. When no one showed up, we came forward with an RFP to fix the building. I don't believe it was any kind of a joint thing at all. It was strictly our organization offering to operate the building and conduct the entire restoration and preservation under our nonprofit organization recognized by the state.
Thank you. You guys have done a great job.
Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. Okay, so we have a motion. It's Article 34, South Harwich Meeting House Restoration and Preservation. The motion is to accept and adopt $100,000 from CPC. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It's a vote. Thank you. Next is Board of Health, Article 41.
I move we accept and adopt Article 41, Acceptance of General Laws, Chapter 111-26G.
Second.
Okay, moved and second, Article 41, the acceptance of general laws, Chapter 111, Section 26G. Paul, we had a question on this last week, just the logistics of how this, why we're doing this and how it all works. Do you want to address that at all? Just the fact that, about the inspector, what we're trying to accomplish here, I guess, just for clarification.
I'd be happy to answer questions, but just to note that this was not submitted by the Board of Health.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I wasn't here last week, and just as a reminder, I think we had a meeting in which the Board of Health came in during one of their annual reviews, or whatever that annual report I think you have, and they had mentioned that they were having a hard time getting people. And the board had asked me to ask Coleman and Page about if someone wanted to be a septic installer and be on the Board of Health, was that permissible? And it is permissible, provided 2 things occur. One is the town has to accept the local statute, and then secondly, no person can be an installer and review their own work. So those were the two caveats. So I think that, if I remember right, the board wanted to make sure we opened up the field to people that had an expertise in the health world, to be able to allow people to participate where previously, because we haven't accepted this, they could not. So that was kind of the rationale that was behind that. So it wasn't necessarily something that the Board of Health specifically requested. It's something that they had asked the board to give some consideration to. We sent it to Kopelman, and Kopelman came back with that rationale.
You see any problems with this, or?
At the time when there are openings and vacancies on the Board of Health, a member of the community who is an installer did come to the office and had an interest in serving on the board, and we talked about whether or not there was a conflict of interest. In accordance with conflict of interest, I think there's a lot of appearances here with the type of work that the board does. And yes, Chris and the selectmen wrote to Kopelman and Page to get this opinion, and this was part of the very lengthy opinion as to how the board, how the town could open up the Board of Health to other industries. And this addresses one section. This is the opportunity for someone who works in the community to be appointed to a board, but it doesn't address the other issues of the ongoing conflict of interest that can be an issue at every board meeting. If you think about conflict of interest, someone would need to recuse themselves from many of the variances that come before the Board of Health, because they're septic system variances that then go out to bid to septic installers. So since that covers about 80% of our work, while you may consider adopting this to allow someone to serve on the board, there's still a very large area of conflict. I think that these provisions, the town, I believe, has adopted them in some of the other inspectors, electrical, plumbing, gas, that allow those trades to work in town, provided someone else reviews their installations. That person doesn't come back and serve on a board. So it's a little bit different, and I think you might want to consider that. I mean, it's a good provision, but I'm not sure it totally solves the issue of someone serving on the board, as well as, you know, it could get a little delicate if someone is submitting permits to me. I would be reviewing permits for my board member. So there are a lot of things to think about here. But the measure, it's a good measure to have if we can work around some of the conflict issues.
Okay. Well, and I think anyone who came into, in that particular case, that, you know, said, I'd like to apply to be on the Board of, Board of Health, not only from the Board of Health perspective, but also the interview committee and whatnot, I think would have to go into some detail as to what they're going to be allowed to do and not do, when they have to recuse themselves and that type of thing. So, you know better than we do, but it's not everybody you can serve on the Board of Health. You know, there's a certain expertise there and familiarity with, you know, things that go on with the Board of Health that are very important, obviously. So, anyhow, you know?
I know that there's been talk, we spoke at one meeting about having alternate members because of issues where there wasn't a quorum and meetings had to get pushed off for a month at a time. And it seems to me that maybe we need to address that issue first, because if somebody has to continually recuse themselves, who's going to fill that spot? So I don't know if this is putting the cart before the horse, or just a thought.
Good discussion. What?
Was that motion seconded?
Somebody did.
Yeah.
Who seconded it?
Janelle. I did.
Janelle seconded it. There you go. So, all right. We have a motion that's been seconded. Article 41, acceptance of journal laws, Chapter 111, Paragraph 26G. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor say aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Angel, you?
Opposed.
Okay, I guess it's opposed. There we go. All right. Next. Will be Article 47, amend the Code of Howard, Town of Harwich, Chapter 325 zoning, various zoning bylaw amendments.
Chair, I move we accept and adopt Article 47, proposed zoning bylaw amendments.
For a second.
Second.
Moved and seconded to accept and adopt Article 47, proposed zoning bylaw amendments. Discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment if I can.
Go ahead.
Since we first saw this article, I've asked each time it's come up before us that we add to the section that deals with the sign that can be put up, that there is authorization by the landowner. That hasn't happened.
You mean A, the construction signs? Which
Yes.
section are you looking at?
Construction signs.
Okay. All right.
And the reason I see it as a problem is that, yes, we have regulations all over the place which deals kind of with that issue. But it's very unfair to the people who are involved with this to have to go to look through 10 different pages, but we can add 3 or 4 words and it takes care of it. And I don't think anybody would like somebody who's working on their house to put up a sign and say, it's there. I don't care that you own the house. I don't care that you own the land. It's there. I don't think that's a proper approach. And I think people should have the right to say, yeah, you're doing a wonderful job, put the sign up, I think it's great. Or to say, no. And I'm just trying to make it simpler, rather than having no words there.
Dave Spitz, Town
Sure.
Planner.
This came up, this is the third meeting this has been reviewed by you. At the first meeting, Angelo, you brought that up. Very shortly thereafter, I sent a copy to you of how we deal with that now. And what that does, as you pointed out, is it's in our regulations, and every single sign that comes in, we review for, has it been signed by the owner, or is there a letter authorizing it? That's a standard part of what we do. So I submitted that to you, and I'm sorry I was unaware that that was still an issue. I thought that that was satisfactory.
No, I'm sorry, I thought I brought it up the second time and the third time.
I only remember it from the first time.
But that's my only problem. It's a simple problem. No, I don't, I don't think we are in a position to make a change of 3 or 4 words at this point. It's you either accept it or don't, and then make a motion, a change in a motion if we want to.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, so we have a motion to, I'm sorry, go ahead, Brooke. Yep.
Brooke Williams, West Harwich. My concern, I appreciate the work that's been done in regard to the grandfathering relative to the duplexes that in the CH1 district, allowing a duplex as a single-family house on 10,000 square feet if there's adequate access to the road and so forth. I think that's a proper modification. But the second aspect was to then move to have a duplex requiring a full acre on Route 28. And I think respectfully that that is one in which I think we need to consider that more carefully, and whether property owners, this is going from the the Dennis to the Chatham lines, that have an acre, one option currently is perhaps 1 or 2 duplexes, and outside village areas, as we're looking at higher density in some village areas, that may be an option and providing housing. And so we're really, I think the notion was somehow we're supposed to be consistent in terms of our tables, but I think as we look at our comprehensive plan in trying to provide housing opportunities, that we really should look at this more thoroughly in terms of that particular side. And I would be in favor of the grandfathering provision, but not in favor of moving from the half acre to the.
Okay, so Brooke, just to be clear, you're talking about the Table 2
right.
area regulations. It says under CH1, well, CH1, district use is a new, and that's 2-family dwelling, lot frontage, well, the table's fouled up, at least so we had, the lot area 40,000 square feet, the frontage 150.
Right.
That's the
exactly,
line you're
yes.
talking about.
And
right?
I'd point out, obviously, there are other things in there that are almost, we make higher things. So adult entertainment on CH1 is for 50,000. So I don't think having 2 duplexes is, I don't think it's like adult entertainment. I think we should be considering perhaps guidelines, and we're talking later about the Affordable Housing Fund, how we can have some options for property owners, perhaps to have duplexes on Route 28. So I think it would be appropriate.
Okay, David, do you have a response to that?
I actually agree with the direction that Brooke is going in, but I don't agree with the specific steps of getting there. Right now, the typical lot size for residential use in Harwich is 40,000 square feet. Once upon a time, it was 7,500, but for various reasons, the town has increased the lot size step by step until the 40,000. We allow throughout most districts, most residential districts, a single-family home on 40,000 square feet or a duplex, a 2-family unit on the same 40,000 square feet. So you can actually get more housing units by building a duplex on every lot. That's just the existing situation in Harwich. We have one district where that's an exception, and the way it's worded, and this is an oversight, you can do a single family in the CH1 on 40,000, and you can do a 2-family unit on 20,000. So we didn't think that should continue now that the situation has been uncovered. How do you fix it? I'd be glad to see both single-family and duplex be 20,000, but there has been consistent indication from voters that we do not want to increase density in this town right now. I believe we should take a careful look at that in village districts and areas such as CH1, but now is not the time to do that sort of increased in density. And to fix this and to make it consistent, the correct thing to do right now is to make it 40,000 for both single-family and 2-family in that district.
Okay, be interesting discussion on town meeting, I'm sure, so. Okay, anybody else?
Mr. Chairman,
Yep, go ahead.
if you look at page 79 of your document there, you do have a letter from the chair of the planning board, just indicating that they voted to recommend A and B, but not C.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. The guest house discussion, there were too many different directions, and we decided it was not important enough to go forward with this year. So we're going to try to approach that a different way next time.
So are you going to amend the motion? when
Yes.
you're at town
Well,
meeting?
we're proposing on town meeting floor
Okay,
to take that part of it out.
yep, okay. All right, further discussion on Article 47? Hearing none, the motion is to accept and adopt, right? Okay. Let's put it to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? It's a unanimous vote. Okay, thank you. Move on to Article 55, amend the charter, establish a charter enforcement commission.
Mr. Chair, I move we accept and adopt Article 55, amend the Harwich Home Rule Charter, establish a Charter Enforcement Commission.
Second.
And it's moved and seconded, Article 55, to accept and adopt, amend the charter, establish a charter enforcement commission. Discussion?
Just one thought. I think enforcing what's going on in the charter is a good thing to do. My only concern is about a year ago, we started to realize how difficult it was to understand everything that was in the charter and what was the right thing to do. I know that Charlene checked and found out in the last 2 or 3 years, 2 years or so, we've been to the town council a dozen times to get a definition of what activities you should take. And I think it would be better to keep on going forward with the Charter Review Committee to make the charter as clear as possible so everybody understands what's there. And then if there's a desire to do this. I'm just concerned that there's so many issues where people right now, including this group, don't know which way to go, that it's going to cause problems.
Sandy, how are you?
I'm fine, Peter, thank you. There's no reason why both can't happen at the same time. No matter what action is taken, it's going to be 2 years before a charter enforcement commission would actually be elected. Plenty of time to go through the charter and reconcile those things that are not clear.
Sandy, just so we're up there, could I just ask, do you see any merit, probably not, but any merit, we have a charter review committee. Could some group like that be charged with at least letting folks know what potential charter violations might be?
What I would like to see come out of this is the commission. I think it's a thing to, I'm grasping for a word. I want to see this charter commission never used, this enforcement commission. I would like to see people be made aware of what exactly it is they should be doing under the charter. I don't think there's been a real significant effort to educate people serving on town committees and boards. This is kind of a shot across the bow, a heads up. But I think at the end of the day, if the next 2 years were spent in really drilling down into the charter, figuring out what's confusing, clarifying it, changing it, taking a look at the procedures within each board, that by the time this actually becomes a reality, it will be a committee that never meets.
So,
Because
okay.
this is not a policing commission. This is a responsive, if somebody has a concern, it's a local access, something that people can get to easily without having to involve the state, so that things can be headed off before they become a huge issue. I mean, if there's an issue that's brought before this commission, it's found to be a problem, somebody said knock it off, don't do it anymore, and they comply, end of story.
Do you see the potential for the Charter Review Committee to take on an expanded role just to educate folks that are
I think
serving
that's
on boards
something
and
that certainly,
committees? I mean,
yes, sure, why not?
because what I don't quite get, I'm sorry, I asked you last time you were here to see us, you know,
Mhm.
can you give us an example and whatnot? And I understand you're reluctant to do that at that point in time. But
Well,
if-
I
if
don't, I'm not interested in pointing fingers. There have
understand.
been concerns, there are things that I probably could point out. I don't want to get into
I understand, but
personal
at
issues.
some point, as part of educating people how they're conducting business or what they're supposed to do or not do, someone has to point those things out to them. And I think if the Charter Review Committee took an expanded role to educate people as to what the roles and responsibilities associated with the charter are, that could go a long way to solving whatever the issues are, that are out there.
It
I'm
could.
guessing.
It could, but I think this provides a further incentive to do that.
Yeah. So then the next question is, I think, just sitting here, that the way it's crafted, I'm guessing that folks that might want to run for this board would sit there and say, well, do I need legal counsel to come with me when I'm dealing with something?
I
And
don't-
I know you minimize that, but,
Provincetown has had this for years, and I don't think they have problems finding candidates for selectmen up there. Matter of fact, I think it gets pretty fractious at times.
don't know. I've heard, does Bourne have a similar, somebody, where
I don't know.
Bourne, somebody told me.
I'm sure there are others who do,
Yeah.
but that's the one I went to
Yep.
formulate this.
I think I haven't talked to anybody in Bourne, but I think I've heard that Bourne has it, and it's been, I'll say a challenge, let's put it that way. I'm not gonna. I don't know
Shouldn't be.
anymore. So,
Shouldn't be. If everybody understands their job, it shouldn't be a challenge at all.
all right, thank you. Anybody else? Voter Information Committee.
Yeah, I'm back. I think when the committee handbook is finished, that a lot of the information in that revised draft is going to provide a lot of help to the boards and the chairs of those boards along this same line of what's appropriate, what isn't, following the charter.
Thank you. All right, anybody else? So, I lost track. The motion is accept and adopt, I think, right?
Who made? I completely
Michael.
missed the motion on that one.
Who seconded it?
Me.
Janelle? Okay. So, Article 55, amend the Harwich Home Rule Charter, establish a Charter Enforcement Commission. We'll put it to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All opposed? You're none, you didn't,
Opposed.
you're what?
2-2.
2-2, okay, all right, thank you.
Only for timing issue, that's all.
Okay. All right, move on to Article 56, demolition of residential buildings bylaw. What?
No motion because it was 2-2.
2-2. Article 56, an act of general bylaw, demolition of residential buildings. Is there a motion? Positive motion? Is there another motion? No motions? No?
Mr. Chair, I move that we do not accept Article 56 to enact a general bylaw, demolition of residential buildings.
So I think you would mean indefinite postponement, is what
That's
the-
what I mean.
Okay.
I'll second
Not for it, I mean, that's.
Not for it.
Okay, all right, indefinite postponement.
I'll second that.
Okay, moving second, indefinitely postpone Article 56, an act of general bylaw, demolition of residential buildings. Discussion. Chris?
Mr. Chairman, I have been asked to look at this from the point of, is this spot zoning? And I don't have the material with me, but I did have a conversation with the attorney that kind of specializes in zoning. He indicated that he did not believe it was spot zoning because it goes to more how things are funded by the town. He did have some concerns and was not sure whether it would pass muster with the Attorney General's office when they review these, from the perspective of, because it's specifically kind of targeting affordable housing, that there are some other, it's actually a chapter, Civil Rights Act 1964, that there may be some issues related to that. So he cautioned that, you know, there may be some issues that the Attorney General may not even approve it based upon some of those elements.
As we know, it's a petition article, and you can't change petition articles, so the wording is the wording, so. For discussion, the motion is to indefinitely postpone. Hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, it's indefinitely postponed. Thank you. Okay, next. New business. Consideration of Habitat Hedge requests for funding for affordable housing. I do want to point out, let's see, I'm gonna get by, excuse me for a second, I'm gonna get by. I'm gonna get caught up, is what I get. Bear with me to find this. Okay. So what we have before us is a request, two requests, I think. One is from, I'll just say the common name, well, one is from Habitat and one is from Hetch, I do believe.
Two in total.
Yeah. Has to do with 9397 Route 28 in West Harwich. I'm going to deal with the Habitat one first. Lidor, where are you? Hiding back there. There you are. I want to recognize
Mr. Chair, if I might,
Mr. Howell.
I'm here representing Hesh. You can deal with theirs first, but the property is owned by Hesh.
I understand.
Getting to that point kind of
understand.
requires you to go through the Hesh portion.
I understand. We will get to the hedge part, okay? I promise you, okay? I promise you. I just want to point out, I want to put her on the spot, but I guess I will, but Lidor reached out to me I believe it was last Wednesday, and I appreciate it very much. She called me and said, you know, we had this request in here, Habitat for $300,000 for that site. Basically, she was asking, you know, what my opinion was and what I thought. And so what I said to her was, number one, and you can all hear this, number one was that I was disappointed that, based on my knowledge, that when we left the meeting here a couple of weeks ago with, you know, all the parties here working with West Harwich, that there was a small group was going to get together, and my expectation was, I think this board expected that they would come back and say, oh, okay, we figured it out. Not everybody's happy, but we figured it out. And to my knowledge, and we'll hear from Chris in a few minutes on that meeting, or meetings, that didn't happen. And then I had a wonderful discussion with her, and we were trying to figure out, how to move forward here. I said, furthermore, my expectation was that you're going to come back, Habitat was going to come back and look for money to get plans and site development sort of funding together, so we could all have a plot plan that showed, what was going to happen at the site, and some of the details and whatnot. And then we got beyond that, and I said, and by the way, we just IP'd an article that was Article 56 of demolition of residential buildings. And I said, in my opinion, and I told her, I think straight out, I didn't have a feeling or a sense that this board was going to be in favor of that particular article. But it was an article that would have, in theory, blocked funding on this site. I'll just use that term, blocked, okay? And so, and with town meeting only, 3 weeks away now? I'm sitting there saying, you know what, if we go ahead and vote $300,000, it's going to look like, if that article somehow passes, that we're trying to get around things. We're kind of doing things too fast and whatever. And so we ended up coming to a conclusion that said, it makes a lot of sense to get up to $35,000, which you reminded me to use the term up to $35,000, to get this thing going on your part of it. Okay, and you related to me that was a similar thing that was going on in Falmouth, or had gone on in Falmouth on a different site, obviously, but, same sort of thing. And that up to $35,000 would include engineering, architectural work, environmental, legal work, and an appraisal. And so, the outcome or the result, that would be architectural and engineering plans for site review purposes. So I think we agreed that that was a worthwhile thing to do. So I just want to set that stage, that I appreciate the fact you reached out to me and we had a great conversation. I think we came to a meeting of the minds anyhow, at least you and I. And I do remember that after our initial conversation, you were going back to your team, and then, you came back to me, I think 2 days later, and said, yeah, it sounds like something we should be pursuing. So, and you can clarify anything beyond that, Ladera.
That's pretty clear. Just for the group, I think people are tired of hearing me, but my name is Lee Darazola. I work with Habitat for Humanity as part of their land acquisition team. We're here for 93 and 97 Main Street. We work in partnership with our communities. A lot of what we do is working with our partners to find out what makes sense for a community. We understand housing. We have a model we think works really well, and it works when we go hand in hand with our communities. If Harwich is telling us these are the steps to take, we're happy to take those. And we were ready at the last meeting. I think there was a little bit of a procedural miscommunication. We had been happy at the last meeting to say, sure, let's go for a planning grant. We want to see that this board is committed to learning more about this project, and we'd be very happy to walk away from this meeting with a vote for funds so that we can go ahead and learn more and bring those plans back to this board and to the community for discussion and review. And obviously the concept is the next step is then a vote for funding, and we will try to do that as quickly as possible because our other partners, Hatch, have time constraints. And they need to look, they have a balloon payment, and so they need to have a path forward. So we would want to move quickly so that they can have their path forward as well. If anyone has any questions about how we're intending to do this.
Okay, I think we're going to get back to that in a few minutes, but I just want to set the stage. And then Chris, if we could, I think you got some parties together after our last session focused on West Harwich, and I think that was, what, a month ago or something, 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, it was
Were you
the end.
Skyping in on that one? No? Okay.
It was at the end of February. I guess just to maybe do a brief summary, we did have a meeting which myself, Charlene, on behalf of the administration, met with folks from from Hetch and from the neighborhood, and we had some discussions. And I thought the discussions were headed in a fairly fruitful direction, And then we said, well, let's take those concepts and kind of commit them to paper. And I think when both sides went back, they had a little bit of heartburn with a little bit of those elements that we had potentially reached. What I see, though, and I'd like to kind of focus on potentially a recommendation to the board moving forward, that I think, as you heard tonight, Habitat is seeking the $300,000 towards the purchase. I think Hetch does have the issue with the balloon payment in April, so they need to have a process how to move forward. The neighborhood, I think, is very much wanting to make sure that the historic integrity of the Chase House is preserved, and how do we accomplish that? When we tried to put that pen to paper, not everybody agreed with the different elements. And basically what you have before you tonight is the formal application for the $300,000 from Habitat. That was vetted by the two housing agencies. We did include that material in the board's package. So I think what they're looking for, or what Habitat, or let me say my recommendation towards Habitat, is if the board is so inclined to pursue that, I think that if there was some kind of recommendation from the board saying that we are interested in pursuing it, that may help to move this process along. I think the second component was a second application that Hetch put together for the $25,000 application, and that would cover site development concepts, the reconfiguration of the property for 40B purposes, which I think needs to be done in either case, really. And that specifically also that the Chase House be reviewed by the historic preservation, by a historic preservation consultant to create and manage a historic restriction, perhaps in the form of an RFP, or if there is a purchase and sale that's done, to link it to the purchase and sale. So I think that the recommendation that I'm trying to hopefully at least give a suggestion to the board would be to pursue the $25,000 kind of now, so we can put together and get some additional details. And part of that $25,000 would be to do the historic preservation restriction on the Chase House and the associated barn. And then during this process, if Hetch, I think the real hang-up is what happens if the historic preservation is pursued, but there's no takers for it? Then what does Hetch do? And I don't think they can limit themselves to not having that. That is kind of a, if they're stuck to having the property with the historic preservation and maintaining it as affordable housing, I think that's really where the issue comes in. The stab I took, and I did not mention this, I think, in our meetings with people, but if they are in that situation, I think that ideally they could if they were to have a partner, put it on the purchase and sale or include it in the RFP, then you know you have somebody that's interested in preserving the house. If no one comes up as a part of a purchase and sale, no one comes up as part of the RFP, then I put in here that perhaps they would consider filing an application with CPC to make improvements to the Chase House and barn to try to enhance its current affordable housing elements and historic preservation. Obviously, under CPC, you can do both historic preservation and housing, and seeing a joint application be filed, I think, may have some merit to it. But I wish I could say I was successful in bringing the parties together. I think we got towards a solution, just not all the way there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I would say from Habitat's perspective, for us to continue with this program, trying to create another of our neighborhoods. I think some of you were at our Oak Street dedication, and our goal with this property has been 4 to 6 homes, all of them affordable, sweat equity. We have been through the Housing Committee. I think we went to 2 meetings, the Housing Authority. We were here before. At this point, I do think we would respectfully ask out of this group for a vote either for the $300,000 to purchase with the contingencies on viewing documents, or the $35,000 for the planning. But I think we need a clear direction and some funding so we can do what we do good.
Okay. Mr. Howell, you've been patient back there. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
And you're representing Hetch, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
the board
just
voted to
checking.
have me represent them. In fairness, I think there's a little confusion about this. We heard you a month ago, and I was given the task by my board to take a shot at this. I mean, that's why I brought up the fact that Hesh owns the properties involved. And we never actually contemplated Habitat as a player in the front lots, because they were never actually going to be title holders for that. The only way there would be a front pair of lots would be through the 40B process, because there's no other way to get to it other than that. I do want to stop just for a second and thank the Urbanos. They spent a lot of time with me. Chris spent a lot of time with me. Everybody did. I think we were into it for about 15 hours worth of discussion. So I don't want you to walk away from this believing that we didn't
but
make it.
sometimes people can't, see a meeting in mind.
Well, we actually got very close, and the devil of the detail would have been imposing a historic restriction on a yet-to-be-created lot as a first thought that goes on the deed, because at that point we would be handcuffed for any options, absent a buyer that's willing to accept that restriction. Our thought, especially after hearing from the community, we've had this property since the late 2000s, and we honestly were planning, when Bob Murray was alive, to put between 20 and 27 houses there. There was no thought at that point that we'd be trying to save the front portion of the property. As I said back in that meeting about a month ago, I didn't see that these things were necessarily natural enemies of each other, that there should be a way for us to be able to preserve history at the same time as provide worker housing for people that need it. Habitat's in a position to be a developer for this, which is why we wanted to partner with them. We're currently not in that position. Additionally, the element of the historic preservation and creating the captain's districts came up subsequent to all of that just recently. So in the scenario that you have in front of you, we thought we were able to get all the parties something. I mean, everybody has something. You have an affordable housing fund whose purpose is encumbered for affordable housing and only affordable housing. We have properties that we're really not in a position to develop ourselves at the moment. In our hearts, we don't want to sell to a commercial developer because that would wind up giving you maybe 25% affordable housing, and the rest of it would be market rate housing. And that project, in order for that to make economic sense, would probably be a large-scale project. In this scenario, we thought we were able to bring forward something that, with a conditioned motion, because that was always our intention too. There was never an inkling on anyone's part that the selectmen would just give, with no strings attached, $25,000 Hesh, $300,000 to Habitat, and let us walk. We all need some money to be able to pull off this, but the objective was save the captain's house, to carve out a property for that to sit on, and the balance of that would be available for Habitat to develop a site plan, and they're not able to do that now because they're not even quite sure where their lot line is going to wind up being, and be able to pull off two things at the same time, historic preservation and affordable housing with the town as a partner. I don't feel that the petition article is necessarily something that's at odds with that objective. I mean, that only kicks in if there's town funding. If Hesh, for instance, saw this whole deal fall apart and had to go into a commercial endeavor, that bylaw wouldn't actually accomplish anything. We would like to save the house. We would like it to go into the hands of somebody who's going to care for it in the manner that the folks who are interested in historic preservation would like it preserved. And incidentally, that was for the external historic facade of the house. No one was talking about restoring the inside of it. But we need some, as Ladara pointed out, we're sitting on a loan. We need a commitment in order to extend the loan that shows the town is willing, under certain conditions, to move forward with this, with Habitat as a developer, and Hesh carving out the property for the front portion with an RFP to be issued that's restricted to those people who would be willing to bid on it, understanding that the subsequent sale would be with a deed restriction for historic preservation. I think we were able to accomplish all that, even though we couldn't put it in a writing. Part of the reason we couldn't put it in a writing is it needs to be in front of you. Mr. Clark has absolutely no signature ability to sign on to an MOU so that we can all understand that the town will do this and Hesh will do that. Lou, for all its good intents, wasn't in a position to be held accountable either in an MOU. The only party that would have been held accountable is Hesh. But we're here in good faith showing with the request that that's our intent, that if you vote for that, that you can condition the vote to release the money in the sequence where A, there's historic preservation at the end of that process, and B, you're not going to release money until you see more in terms of a site plan that would be filed by Habitat. I don't think anyone was looking for you to take a vote with no restrictions whatsoever that you were going to release the money.
So Don, let me just ask, because there's a specific Hetch request for $25,000. I'm just reading it from the Harwich Affordable Housing Fund, which will be used to assist in reconfiguring the property to promote the development of affordable housing and to hire an historic preservation consultant to create and manage the historic restriction RFP for the exterior of the structure, right? That is Hetch's proposal tonight.
And that would only be possible by exercising 40B to allow us to erase some of the lot line and reimpose an east-west lot line.
Well, no, I understand that. I understand that. And then if we couple that, just asking the question, if we couple that with what Ladera and I sort of came up with, that is giving Habitat up to $35,000 so that they can work the site, their part of the site, once you decide what the rest of it looks like. Is that sufficient at this point in time?
Yeah, we view them as companion pieces, ultimately. We use our money to be able to, under the 40B process, erase the lot lines and show what it is that the existing house is going to sit on. And at that point, Habitat would be developing a site plan for the remaining portion of the property because we're not involved in that. They're the developer.
Right, but then everything comes back here, and we say, okay, we're...
And you certainly can impose that restriction.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think you're right. It really has to be sequential because they can't do their planning unless you know where the roads are, or the road, I should say. You can take a shot at it, but I think it has to be sequential.
Actually, it's very much hand in hand, which is why we are happy to be partnering with Hetch and doing it cooperatively. The Habitat piece would be the engineering, a lot of attention to FEMA, the environmental. So we would be working with Hetch to determine the road layout, road profile, and the lotting, the homes behind the, no?
No, the reason I'm shaking my head is until
He does that a lot, by the way.
one of the committees here says, yes, this is what we will allow under the 40B in terms of roads or where you can go, I think you're going to have a problem and do it twice. Because in the first place, you've got to get the lots set. Because you can't figure it out what you're doing unless you know where the lot lines are. And there are lots of reasons to change where they are and whatnot during the process. So I'm not talking 6 months from now. I'm talking sequentially following where, and we're working with Hetch so that you get all the material in line.
Well, I think, Angela, they would work at the pace that makes them integrated, if you will, where it applies.
Sure.
And I don't think what we're saying is, or I think what they're asking for tonight is Hetch for $25,000, for Habitat up to $35,000. During the course of the next, I don't know how many months it's going to be, they're going to spend that money, and then collectively they're going to come back here, whatever sequence it is, come back here and give us a report and say, here we are, and, you know, let's get all our input and
That's
everything
fine.
else.
They just
Is that
can't
okay?
go down the path separately.
I don't think they're both designing separate roads tonight.
We're friends. We're together on this one.
Okay, Michael.
So Leandra, your first proposals to Housing Committee and to us
Correct.
was for $300,000.
Correct.
And that included coming back, and you were looking for a nod that we supported the project, but that then included you coming back with a site plan through the 40B process, showing a road going in and showing 4 or 6 lots and maybe having to tear down the ranch.
Yes.
Okay, so now that has evolved into a lot of memos, a lot of conversations, and us expending more taxpayer money to hire independents to do the same thing to help different groups try and figure out what they're going to do with somebody else's private property. And I'm not sure I understand why we're doing 2 separate proposals when we can do one proposal, and they're going to come back to us with a site plan regardless.
But,
Go ahead, Angelo.
but if you're working in the affordable housing area, very rarely do you get $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. What you get is money to start down the path, and you get down that path. And they know by what we're doing here is if they get down the path correctly, they're going to get the $300,000. I mean, that's that's a given.
Michael.
You completely lost me, because they had a proposal for $300,000 that included coming back to us with a site plan. And now we're allocating money, or being asked to allocate money, for a separate request, which we should take up separate, but their $300,000 proposal included them coming back with the site plan that we're talking about.
So you're willing to give away $300,000 not seeing any plan? I didn't think you'd do that.
No, I think we have to, it's contingent, Angelo, and it was always contingent upon an approved site plan. So why are we adding the money for the site plan?
We're not adding anything, we're just paying 25 first and 35 first. That's what we're doing.
So the intent is to stay at 300,000 and no more.
Well, it could be, or it could be 350 when they
So-
come back next time.
Okay, so it is more money.
Or it could be 210.
I would step in here for a second, if you don't
Go
mind,
ahead,
and
go
say that we are offering up a different path through the process. The way Habitat goes about development, there are certain costs. We're not duplicating any efforts by offering this sort of small step first. These are all the same
Every place.
engineering, environmental, legal, it's all the same costs that would have been borne. There are different parties that pay for things we do. I probably shouldn't say it right out here now, but we do come back and ask for construction money. Building affordable housing is incredibly expensive. It just is. When you sell a house for $140,000, you lose money every house you sell. It just costs more to build them. So we look for strong community support. We do a lot of fundraising. We try to get off-Cape funds. We get private donations. We're not double billing. We're not creating extra work that's then going to cost more. It's just a different sequence.
Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
For the record,
Yes.
I was at the Habitat dedication.
Thank you for
And
coming.
anyone that was at the Habitat dedication would have been choked up. It was an amazing event. What you do is amazing. Again, I'm trying to go from your original proposal, which was for $300,000, with the stipulation that before you got the money, you were going to come back to us with a site plan.
I think I need to say something about that.
Mr. Howell.
While I agree with Michael's comments, our marching orders have gotten different. We are trying to do 2 separate things now to
From
be
who?
able to accomplish 2 things. It's not just a pure affordable housing project. The lack of having a written agreement shouldn't be misconstrued as to the fact that we don't agree with the historic preservation people, and we are trying as hard as we can to do 2 things at the same time that would benefit the town in completely different ways, but it's going to cost a little bit more money to sequence that because Hesh owns the property. The developer would be Habitat. For us to be able to accomplish the preservation with an RFP or a private sale would necessarily require a 40B, but we are not going to manage the site plan for the aggregate of property that's separated out. That's going to be Habitat. We're in a contractual agreement with these folks to be able to be a developer for that property, and we'd like to be able to see them do that. But along the way, we picked up another goal. The townspeople had made a really clear statement that they wanted to see if we could take a shot at seeing if we could preserve the captain's house at the same time as giving you the affordable housing. And this is, you know, affordable housing not in the way that a commercial developer would do it, it's the way that Habitat does it, where they're, you know, we'd maximize 40B. If that's not what the town wants, then perhaps we should step back. But the 300,000 would have only given you a plan that would have had the affordable housing in it. It would not have afforded any protection. The demolition delay is over for this. So we would like to be able to make a commitment morally from Hesch's standpoint that we're willing to take on selling the front house and trying to get it in the hands of somebody that's going to love it and take care of it and restore it, at least externally. But we also can't forget our mission. Our mission is to do affordable housing, and that's why we partnered with Habitat, because we've sat on this property for a long time and nothing has happened.
Michael.
Thank you for the clarification, Don. You mentioned that you're now given different marching orders. Can you elaborate on the different marching orders? That's number one.
Well, they may be self-imposed, but I mean, the last meeting was, how should I put it, a little on the ruckus side. There was a lot of neighborhood sentiment expressed that they wanted to be able to create a corridor of historic preservation. That will not be possible if this goes just purely 40B without the town as a partner. It's the interlocking three partners that get you there. If that's not what the town wants to do, again, whatever motion you wish to put forward can be conditioned in whatever manner you want it to, both as to sequencing and time, what it is you want accomplished first, how much money gets dispersed. The town still owns the money until it's dispersed. We just need a commitment somehow that shows that you're in for the project, and I'm sure that's what Habitat really wants.
For the record, I'd also like to say that I applaud Lou and his entire group for the historic West Harwich effort. That's a separate, whatever deal gets made on that separate house, and however you carve it out, is a separate deal. And it's a separate proposal that we're now proposing using taxpayer money, and you say that what the town wants. Well, we don't know what the town wants. We haven't taken that up yet. If the group comes before us and asks for money because they want to save the house and they want to do historic preservation, that's a separate proposal. The Habitat proposal was an individual proposal for the land out back with the stipulation that you came back with a site review and a plan and possibly tear down the ranch house. You got approval from two different housing committees, or the nod from two different housing committees, and now you're asking for ours, and we have somehow or another managed to tie in assessments on the Captain Chase house. And I don't believe this board ever voted to go that direction.
We didn't vote in either direction, quite frankly, from what I remember. So it's before us this evening, so let's keep discussing it, Angelo.
I think you're missing a piece. I think the getting permission from a town meeting, because that'll eventually have to be voted on, is very difficult to get affordable housing built. And particularly if the neighbors in the area are up in arms. Right now you have a big group in West Harwich being concerned with the historical preservation. That group should be made to be in favor of the affordable housing because they're going to have a say. And I was on the Affordable Housing Committee for, 10 years, and so was Linda. And what you have to do is you have to figure out how you're going to get everybody in one pile. Now, it's easy in West Harwich because you know what the issue is. So you have to work on it. Maybe something will come along and you'll say, no, it never. But I think you have to go down that path of looking at that to help the affordable housing get done. And you have two things going on at the same time. And every time I worked on it, we had to do the initial proposal, get plans, and go through in steps. And I don't see it as us providing any problems or additional problems, as long as there's an understanding that, yes, we know where you're going, we're going to approve that if it meets the goals, and yes, we have money for you going forward. And I think that's what we need to do, and keep it simple.
And I don't think I'm missing a piece, Angela. I think it's two separate proposals. And one is historic preservation, and one is affordable housing. And I don't think we should be tying the two together. The two groups can work independently, and it sounds like they have. But that's not, I don't believe, for this board to be involved.
Vicki, how are you tonight?
I'm well, thank you. So hoping not to confuse matters, I would like to say, speaking to the Habitat proposal and whether it's staged with 35,000 and then the balance towards the 300,000 or towards the full purchase price. The next, really, to spend any more time on this project after tonight, we will need to know that there's a commitment from town leadership towards, at least a preliminary commitment from town leadership for this project. So that's really what this is about. With the 35,000, we can put together a concept plan. We're not going to get through 40B on the initial stage. We have to have a concept plan that's based on real engineering, based on working out the dividing line with Hetch, where the road will go, et cetera. That's what those funds go for. Our next formal time to come back to the Board of Selectmen is when we have a strong concept plan based on real engineering and some good planning. And we're asking for approval of that concept in the form of approval of a local initiative program that would then move up to DHCD. At that time, if the Board of Selectmen likes the plan, is on board, then we certainly have the full intent to ask for the rest of the money if the full 300 is not included, approved tonight, if just the 35,000, because to get to the pathway for 40B, we need to have site control and we need to have a feasible pro forma, so we need to know. So, you know, I think we've said from the beginning, we are looking for purchase funding, and this 35,000 is stage one that brings you a full concept where then you can say yay or nay. If it's nay, the rest of the proposal goes down. If it's yay, then we're looking for land funding, and we go forward to DHCD and on to the local zoning board of appeals based on a concept that the town leadership through the Board of Selectmen has approved.
Thank you. Anybody else? Have a motion? Brooke?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brooke Williams, West Harwich. First, I wanted to address what was in the packet, which was a proposal for 300 and then a proposal for
You mean our packet, you mean?
Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
all
Yeah.
right.
And I think it says under new business, consideration of Habitat and Hetch requests for funding from the Affordable Housing Fund. But if you were to go forward with those two amounts, 300 and 25, you're really not funding from, you're really taking the entire Affordable Housing Fund and placing it in this one particular area. And I think respectfully that that really takes away a tool, because you, as the selectman, you're reviewing these things, takes away a tool that can be used for affordable housing all over Harwich in just one particular case. And in regard to what Mr. Monti has said, I think he had, it was a good comment in the sense of having some study looking at these things. And conceptually what is being discussed is there's now discussion of having the back parcel, and one question about that is, where is that? In the packet, again, there's a circle that includes other properties. It's not very clear where that is. To the north of that is the, or actually to the south, I'm sorry, is the Willow Street property, which is town-owned with some title issues. And then in terms of the historic aspect, that's something the town repeatedly has had. In the 1990s, there were historic inventories on the, from the 1990s. The Chase House has appeared on historic inventories, including on the states. And so it's nothing new. And Mr. Howell previously indicated also there had been no consideration of including the Chase House. And in fact, before Mr. Murray died, when Valerie Foster came in front of the selectmen for some funding, her initial proposal was including the Chase House, and then this report was done. And it is actually, this report has been the wedge. It's not been the house, but it has been the technical work that was done, which I think the first aspect was that the assumption was it was a duplex. It's actually, according to Hetch, it has 3 units, which means it's a triplex, which means under the building code, it should have been a registered architect or a professional engineer to do an analysis of that. And I think that if money is allocated to look at those buildings, it's fine to work with the historic preservation, but the other aspect is to have someone familiar, and the notion would be continuing use. And in regard to the notion of that there's two separate things, I would only refer, as I mentioned earlier, the Stratford getting information to the voters in the town of Brewster to our north. Hetch is asking for money from the town of Brewster to do a Brewster Housing Emergency Loan Program. Some of these are houses that are not historic, some are historic. And so the notion that there are two separate things, or they can't do it, or something they're not familiar with, in this, it says that each structure should, the complete structure should be, inspected. And in the case of the Chase House, a couple of units were looked at. It's 3 units, so the entire structure is not. Another area is the barn. That was not even looked at. So I think that if there is this notion of conceptually looking at the back portion and the front portion, one aspect, and I wrote a letter in November in this regard to the selectmen, should be looking at continuing use of the Chase House because it's providing housing, and that's something we need. In the first presentation to the Housing Committee, or excuse me, the Historic Committee, the lady who's the executive director of Hetch indicated they have a listing of 241 people looking for rental housing. So if we're using money for housing, possibly demolishing housing, I think besides historic preservation, it's questionable. So I think that's very important, to look at continuing use and the historic aspect, but I don't think they're really two separate things. The other element is how you access the back parcel if you're going to separate these. And that's a question. The other point is, including in the proposal, is that perhaps demolishing, it's been called the ranch house, I would like to refer to it as the Bruins fans' house. They're evidently tenants at will. The minimum.
Bruins are out of the playoffs, aren't they?
Well, but they're still fans. They still have their banner up.
Okay.
They have, according to Massachusetts, if you have a tenant will, you have to at least allow 30 days. So think about that. They're 30-day, tenants, whatever. But that's a duplex providing housing. And shouldn't we consider, if we're looking at going into the back approach, working with the existing Chase House, possibly considering the barn, looking at it as part of the construction process, moving it slightly to allow access, but preserving that duplex also on 28 as part of the development, because it's providing 2 units of housing. And so I think the thing is, there are a couple of things that happen on the front parcel which will impact the back parcels, and I think those should be prioritized. The other element is Willow in the back, and that is the notion of, part of the notion has been about the title, but the other aspect is working with the neighbors on Willow, and standard under the Department of HUD, the design advisor, and then when you look at the 40B standards, and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is looking at the entire site, and even buffering. If you have a change of things, you have buffering. So it would, I think, be valuable to the town to work with the neighbors on Willow, and considering there may be a buffer from whatever happens, but in the future, looking at the relationship of that location to the back parcel.
Okay, and at the moment, quite frankly, that back parcel is only on, excuse me, the Chase property, we're not tonight talking about Willow, so.
Well, I understand that, but I think these decisions impact each other.
I know, but the requests tonight are only for funding associated with that one property, so
Right, I understand.
let's just be careful.
But then, in regard to this particular fund, as opposed to the Community Preservation Act funds, which are applied for once a year, this fund allows the selectmen to have, and the Housing Committee and the Housing Authority, to have funds that are available between town meetings and so forth. And if you extinguish this fund for one project, it means that in East Harwich, in North Harwich, in Pleasant Lake, et cetera, that this tool, this funding is gone. So I would suggest that having a targeted study of the different aspects of this would be important. But the other point, Mr. Murray came, I believe it was in 2012, or 2009, excuse me, or 10 or something, whatever. he came with a pre-development proposal, including both these parcels and Willow, which town meeting approved, looking at the comprehensive
Understand.
overall. So I think that was a study first, looking at that. Sadly, that was really not completed. And so I think the other aspect is the notion that Hetch would hire a historic preservation consultant. I would suggest respectfully that it might be better if the town hires an architect, an engineer, and a historic to look at it, because we don't, when we have historic inventories, we don't have the homeowners hire the historic preservation consultants to look at all the properties. We have the town hires a consultant because there are town issues in regard to the historic, and obviously the property rights are important as well. But I think that given this is public funds, the funds are coming from the public to do this. I think both the question of the historic, the housing, which are not at conflicts, and the only other thing I would add to that is that Lexington and Concord both have achieved 10% and are continuing their planning. Their housing production plans have not expired. And I would also say I appreciate the efforts that's been looked into that, but I think that we should not wait on the historic preservation plan, on the historic housing production plan. And this is one example where studies are needed sooner than July and so forth. So I think that targeting some study on these parcels with people with adequate qualifications is important, and I think that will move towards a positive result. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bernadette, you've been patient back there.
Hi.
How are you?
Yeah, hi, Bernadette Wastek. And I've been listening carefully, too, and a couple of things I wanted to clarify, I think. I think we heard a month ago a couple of important things about the Chase House. It is not, by definition, I don't believe, a triplex, meaning that it's 3 separate full units. It's essentially 3 rooms with a shared, it's a rooming house. And that would make a difference in terms of how much and what kind of housing that is. Not that it's not important, not that it's not keeping people sheltered. I also believe that the executive director of Hetch said last month that nobody would be displaced, that there would be places found for people. They wouldn't be kicked out on the streets for whatever happens. And I think what I heard Hetch and Habitat saying tonight is, we'll forget the 300 for now. They're asking for 35,000 and 25,000. So we seem to be spinning our wheels about things that.
Hopefully I'm going to get somebody up here to make a motion pretty quick. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else out there that wants to, anybody else on the board who have a motion, one form or another? Anybody?
I just want a clarification.
Go ahead.
Hetch needs the 25 and Habitat 35?
Yes, up to 35, I understand.
I'd like to make a motion that we provide to Habitat up to $35,000 to begin their studies towards their project, and up to $25,000 to Hetch for the same activity, and also to provide our view that we're much in favor of this project, given that everything works out in the 40B plan, and that historic conservation of the Chase building is an important part of the study.
So you're, okay. Is there a second to the motion? Apparently they're going to try something else, so we'll see how that goes. All right. Motion doesn't have a second, so let's try something else.
I want to second that for discussion.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I would ask Don how.
Excuse me, it's been moved and seconded from the Housing Fund to provide $25,000 for Hedge, up to $25,000 for Hedge, and up to $35,000 for Habitat to get this project started and get us the documentation we need to move forward. So, and it's been seconded, Michael.
For discussion, Don, is this is, and you said at the beginning of the meeting, this is Hetch's property. Is this Hetch's wishes?
Absolutely, and I hope that we don't glide by that last statement that Angelo made in his motion, that should things work out, that you're all in favor of the project,
Yes,
because
you have
that is what we're in
you have
favor
that
of.
in the minutes or the motion?
That is what we're in favor of. It was our wish to try to get everybody on board with this and try to accomplish more than just putting a few affordable houses there. Not that that's not our mission or important, but we were hoping to be able to do two things at once, and this absolutely does that.
And for the board, is the board concerned with, or should we get a list of what this money is going to be spent on?
I'm concerned because of the original 300,000 did include the plan, and that was one of my
We have a
initial thoughts too.
Responsibility to outline this to the taxpayers.
Let me say this, that my discussions, and when Ledara and I talked about this, the $35,000, up to $35,000 for Habitat would be for engineering, architectural, environmental, legal, and appraisals, or an appraisal. And the outcome result would be architectural engineering plans for the site for review purposes. And we could include that in the motion, at least for the Habitat part, if that's what you'd like to do.
I'm curious though, will that 35 be deducted from the 300 for the purchase? Because the initial 300 proposal included all of that stuff.
Go ahead. Ledara, you want to explain that? I mean, it's just one segment of it. Thank you,
In
Mr.
general-
Waystak, for being patient, by the way. Yes.
I'm sorry, did I just come right in front of you? Habitat leverages funds. We look for funds from a variety of sources, depending on timing. We do look for full acquisition funding. We would come back to the Affordable Housing Fund, or depending on the timing, we might look to community preservation for a site of this size with 4 to 6 houses. We would probably look for Federal Home Loan Boston Bank funds. We would look for private home sponsors. We will look for money everywhere. It's, as I said before, we're not adding more costs. It's just a different timing. We're coming now and asking for 35, and then when you see everything, we will be asking someone, some group, to fund the acquisition. I don't want to slip that under the rug. If we had pursued with the $300,000, just right off the bat, yes, we know that the town supports this and we're giving you $300,000 to buy it. At that point, some of the developer funds would have come in and we would have leveraged that, and then later we would have been asking for construction funds. It's all parts that go into doing something which is very costly, and we very much appreciate all the support we get to make it happen.
Now, Mr. Waystak,
Thank
how are you
Mi-
tonight?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm well, thank you. Richard Waystak. A couple of things, just really briefly. The spirit of compromise is trying to be worked here. You know, we have some folks who want to do some preservation in West Harwich, and the folks from Hetch and Habitat are trying to respect that. You know, I've heard Mr. Murray's name mentioned a few times tonight. I worked with Mr. Murray. I was on his first board of Hetch. He brought me into the family pantry. In the last few summers, I've been walking across the Cape in his memory. I knew Mr. Murray very well, and what he tried to do is bring people together in that spirit of compromise to get something done. Another gentleman's here tonight with a PITA shirt on, Mr. Loftus, who for years was the chair of the Housing Committee, who worked diligently to get projects done. You know, we talk about the housing fund. It is there for one purpose and one purpose only. It's for affordable housing. Contributions for $3.25 and $185,000 were made to Gomes Way. $143,000 for deed restrictions on affordable homes. We had $260,000 for Hetch and $368,000 for the CDP over the years. $280,000 for Harwich's buy-down program. So we've had major expenditures of this fund over the years that started at over $1.7 million. And we're not going to expend the funds just with this, because the cell towers continue to put money back into that housing fund every year. The thing is, this is simple tonight. We're not talking a lot of money. We're talking about a fund that's used specifically for affordable housing. You've heard both Habitat and Hetch say this is a compromise. And the bottom line is, if we can get affordable housing done, I need you to remember one fact, and Mr. Galvin, I hope you get this for your notes. From 2000 to 2010, 27% decline in the demographics of people aged 25 to 44. State average is 12.5%, 3.4% nationally. we have lost 27% of our young people. And when Cape Cod Young Professionals did a study a couple years ago, the number one reason we're seeing the exodus of people from Cape Cod is affordable housing. I would urge the board to vote unanimously tonight to approve these funds. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table, and it's for up to $25,000 for a hedge and up to $35,000 for habitat for this site. Michael?
We started to lay out the, what the money was gonna be spent on, and we didn't get to Hetch's money.
Okay. Don, can you give us a list of 6 things you're going to do with the hedge money? Or 5 things? I mean,
Isn't it spelled out in the proposal that you have?
I don't see it.
Well, let me see.
There's a lot of
Let's
stuff
pull
in
it
it.
out.
I think it says, it does. Assist with
Let's pull it up.
If it's in there, then no.
86?
Page 86 at the bottom.
6. No. Went the wrong way.
Do you want me to just read it, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's $25,000 from the Harwich Affordable Housing Fund, which will be used to assist in the reconfiguration of the property to promote the development of affordable housing and to hire a historic preservation consultant to create and manage the historic restriction RFP for the exterior of the existing structure.
Accepted.
Okay.
But if you need a list of 6 things, the first one is going to be a bottle of ibuprofen.
For you or me? For you or me?
2 bottles.
Okay, all right. So, any further discussion? Again, the motion is to provide from the housing fund up to $25,000 for hedge and up to $35,000 for habitat, $35,000 for habitat.
I think the third component being favorably proposed to the development as well,
Yes,
I think was.
thank you very much
Yep.
for pointing it out. That'll be the caveat or rider at the end, okay? All right, further discussion? Hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? It's unanimous vote. Thank you. Congratulations. We'll look forward to the results of your work product and come back and see us. Okay, it's getting late. Town Administrator's report. Chris?
Yeah, and in light of the hour, Mr. Chairman, just 2 things really quick. The first thing is that we did receive a letter from the Mass Department of Transportation just saying that our Chapter 90 allocation would be $686,000. That is the money that we use to match up with what we have in the warrant for $700,000 to get to about 1.4 for roadway. So I just wanted to show that we did get the Chapter 90 allocation in that amount. And then also, I think we had it in the package for the board. We did send letters of invitation for the Muddy Creek Restoration Bridge ribbon cutting event. It'll be Thursday, May 5th at 10 a.m. at Jackknife Beach in Chatham. The rain location will be the Chatham Community Center. And the program has various speakers, most of the folks elected officials, and then the partners that provided the funding for us.
Bill, were you there at 3 o'clock on, Bill? Were you there at 3 o'clock or whatever on Tuesday morning or whatever, Wednesday, whenever those? Oh, okay, just checking.
That concludes my report this evening, Mr. Chairman.
By the way, those beams are in place now? I mean, they set them
Yes.
right away, right? I mean, it's like.
Yeah, actually, I went by yesterday, as a matter of fact, and it just happened to be in the area. So the whole bridge deck all those beams are in place.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference, like overnight, yeah. Okay, anything from the Board of Selectmen? Janelle?
No.
Bill?
No, I don't think so.
I'm done. Okay, thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you.